What if SCP-049 arrived in Warhammer 40K? Before we dive in, hit subscribe so the next transmission isn't lost to the warp. He smells it first. A sweetness curdled into iron, a sickness so ancient it chants. He traces the pressure gradient between worlds on parchment, finds the low where the malady pools. He requisitions a broken anchor, an engine that denies miracles, and rewrites it with alchemical math. He draws a circle in mercury and breath and plate glass. When the beak faces the tear and he speaks the operation's last word, the breach opens and takes him. He falls through a ribbon of aurora that tastes like old coins. The sky above is choked with manufactorum smoke and vox prayers. Hives pierce the clouds like fossil teeth. A bell tolls across the smog and cracks in the middle of the note. He lands in a quarantine courtyard where lines of bodies are stacked like timber. The brick is slick with condensation and soot. 2 arbites in beaked helmets pivot, shotguns half raised. The figure in the mask is not in their lexicon. The smell on his coat is apothecary and graveyard both. Identify. The nearer arbite's officer croaks through a reeked breather. The mask turns. The man behind it inclines his head, gloved hand to breast. A physician, he says, voice dry as paper. The pestilence is here. A coughing girl watches from behind stacked ration crates. She sees gloved hands move with ritual economy. He opens his satchel. Instruments gleam, theatre steel and bone-handled saws, vials of amber and verdigris. He kneels by a twitching man whose skin blooms with weeping lesions that spell an alphabet only flies red. The doctor's fingers touch the man's brow. The patient arches, breath cutting like a wire, eyes glassing. Death arrives as gently as a blanket. The girl flinches. The arbites raise their guns higher. The doctor does not stop. He opens the chest with 3 precise cuts, no wasted motion, no blood pooling where it should. He removes necrotic nodes like pearls taken from a dead prince's mouth. He washes the cavity with an infusion that smells of rain on old brick. The dead man opens his eyes. They are clear and empty as a scrubbed window. He sits, obedient as a doll. He blinks away flies. He rises when told, quieter than the living. "What did you do?" the arbite asks. "I cured him," the doctor replies, as if describing the folding of a sheet. He gestures to the next pallet. More. The sirens take the courtyard then. A rising howl bleeds into the vox frequency. A manufactorum loudspeaker rattles. Seal all hab lanes. Augurs report phage drift over spine 3. By decree of the governor militant, quarantine is absolute. The doctor moves faster than the orders. 2 Medicaid aides in stained aprons follow his gestures as if they are pulled by string. He instructs without looking up. Boil 3 liters of water. Vinegar if you have it. Burn the linens. Do not inhale with your throat. Breathe through your teeth. They obey, grateful to obey anyone. In a command bunker below Spire Halcyon, Governor Militant Cassian Holt watches the feed through green grit. He's lean and tired, a field commissar forced into silk. His adjutant feeds him data in measured spoonfuls. "Unreported asset in Quarantine Court 9, she says. "Uncatalogued uniform, non-standard mask. Relevant to how quickly we die?" The adjutant scrubs back a second of footage and plays it frame by frame. Holt leans. He sees a man die and stand in 3 breaths. He sees the doctor's handshake, just once, like a needle catching on cloth. "Get me Rhine," he says. And an inquisitorial channel. Now. In the courtyard, the doctor tucks away the last of his instruments, as if they are tired animals. He looks to the stack of cured men and women sitting with folded hands like parishioners at a quiet sermon. He counts them by their breathing. The coughing girl coughs again. It is a wet, bright sound. He looks up. Across the gate, soldiers in long coats, PDF, the local defense, pivot to a firing line. An officer with a shaven head and a bionic eye raises 2 fingers. "Stand clear of the infected," he calls. "In the throne's name." "So many thrones," the doctor murmurs. "All of them chairs." The officer's bionic iris tightens. He glances at an auspex slate, then the mask. "Who authorized this intervention?" "Necessity," the doctor says. "It outranks you." A Medicae sister in a grey habit, eye lenses fogged, shoulders through the human tide. She sees the cured patient, quiet, breathing, not rotting. She sees the steady hands. "Emperor's mercy," she whispers, reflex in place of thought. "Not his," the doctor replies. "Mine." The auspex on the officer's wrist clicks twice. An old machine's warning cough. He looks at the sky without needing to. The cloud is coming. It rides the wind like a phalanx. Fat green motes in a brown wave. The gate guards swap magazines for bright stamped hazard shells. The doctor takes 3 steps to the center of the courtyard. He draws a circle on the cobbles with a bottle of mercury shattered against stone. The silver runs in a clean line, a tremor through the metal as if it remembers a shape. He lifts a device from his coat lining. A brass framework around a broken crystal. Wires knotted into a rosary. He sets it down at the circle's edge and touches a rod to 3 points, like tapping the pulse at the wrist, throat, groin. The device hums, hungry. The courtyard's light thins, color wrung away and returned wrong. The cloud hits the perimeter like a tide against groins. It should bypass cloth and lung. Miasma passes where flesh is weakest. But the circle's edge pulls. The fog comes in and stops at that shining line. It rises, then falls. It hisses, soapy and thwarted. The doctor's hands shake harder. The brass framework glows a dirty white. He closes his eyes. He whispers words that taste like copper to the audience and like grammar to the thing he addresses. When the wind moves again, the courtyard is brighter along the ground. The cobbles are wet with burned vapor. The smell is vinegar and salt and singed hair. Codex note. The circle is a miskeyed micro-anchor. A broken Scranton array tuned to damp warp volatility, forcing miasmatic vectors to precipitate at a narrow perimeter while banking a non-trivial debt in the local Imperium. On a balcony above, a servo skull turns, lenses glittering, and a woman in black watches it all through the skull's eyes. Inquisitor Daliavaro wears her rosette like a blade in the belt. The man beside her is a thin creature with the absence around him that makes candles gutter. The blank looks down without blinking. "That is not Mechanicus right," Varro says. "Nor is it sanctioned sorcery." "Then it is an unauthorized machine," the blank says, voice dry as salt. "And a witch." Varro does not smile. We do not rush to naming. Below, Holt arrives with a handful of guards. The man has a general's jaw and a worker's hands. He takes in the circle, the device, the cured. He has seen things in campaigns he does not discuss with priests. He makes a choice because he must. "You," Holt calls to the doctor. "You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you shot." "To shoot me," the doctor says, sounding bored, "is to shoot a vaccine. It will make you feel good. It will not end the fever." Holt lets the seconds pass. He is listening to his own breath. It is steady, which is useful. "We are losing Hab wards by the hour," Holt says. "What do you need?" "A place to operate," the doctor says without looking at the soldiers. "Tools, and the patients you fear the most." Varro steps into the air on a servo lift, the skull bobbing beside her like a courtier. She glides to the courtyard level and lands without ceremony. Her retinue follows, the blank with dried ink eyes, a sister hospitaller with a white-gloved hand on a steel case, an acolyte bearing a flamer with studied reverence. Hold your questions, Varro orders Holt without looking away from the mask. This is mine until it isn't. Holt's frown is a scar turned sideways. Everything on my world is mine until it isn't. The doctor watches them trade control like knives. He has no interest in jurisdiction. Pestilence does not obey warrants. Varro steps close enough to smell formalin. The mask's lenses show her reflection in two black rivulets. The beak does not move when he speaks. He calculates whether she will attempt to touch him. She does not. I am Inquisitor Thalia Varro, Ordo Hereticus, she says. I will discern what you are and what you serve. I am Doctor, he says. He does not give a name because names are bottles. Sometimes they don't unstop her. And what is the name, she tries, letting the hook trail, of your enemy? The pestilence, he says. The word occupies more space than it should. It is here without manners. Describe it, Varro says. Do you describe a scent to a man without lungs? The doctor replies, puzzled. You are living in it. The blank steps closer. The air remembers to be cold around him. The doctor's coat settles, garments adjusting in a draft that is not physical. The null's presence sandpapers the edges of the circle's hum. Interesting, the doctor murmurs, not unkind. A patient who steals symptoms. The blank stares. It is not dislike, it is lack. A runner breathes the courtyard. He's 12, underfed, conduit thin, his voice a wire vibrating in the wind. Governor, outer wards, walkers from the drain fields. Something's wrong with their heads. A siren catches the last syllable and carries it to the hive's skin. An Auspex station burns out. The storm on the horizon expresses a new color. Holt touches his bead. Rhine, tell me something useful. Colonel Janek Rhine speaks in the way men do when they hold the ground between two avalanches. The plague fields are moving, he says. Not the fog, the soil. We're picking up seismic micro-creep. Vox intercepts report chanting on a low frequency. Not ours. Varro turns her servo skull. It licks the feed like a faithful dog. She takes in the map. It is a bruise blooming under the city's skin. Holt finds a choice and presses it. Quarantine moves to cordon. Rule of thirds. Burn every third block. Vend the rest. We're not losing the manufactories. Burn my patients, the doctor says. There is no anger in it. There is an autopsy note. Very good. The pestilence abhors an empty bed. It will find you in your sleep and put you back. Who, Varro says, are you to tell me what the pestilence abhors? Who are you? The doctor replies. To tell it what you are. They stand like two bones in the same rib cage. The blank breathes without sound. The Hospitaller watches the cured tilt their heads at nothing. Then the sky answers for all of them. The cloud breaks open. Not the miasma, the cloud. It peels back and something heavy and wrong falls through. It does not fall fast because it is not falling properly. It settles, arrogant, buoyed by physics that have been bribed. A barge like a cathedral that died of tumors lowers itself on trails of chemical vesper. It is a plague-burst hulk. Its hull a quilt of healed wounds. Bells hang from the prow, all cracked, all singing out of tune. Symbols stud its flank. They mean fatherhood, rot, rebirth, and jokes told at funerals. Around it, lesser shapes drool from penetrator pods. They hit hap plate like eggs, crack, and flood. The first wave are men who gave up their lungs to carry flies. Their armor is pitted and pocked. They wear disease like a medal. The Vox yields a word that is not a word so much as a smell and a memory of fruit left on a windowsill. The name spreads because names are germs. Death Guard. Varro's eyes go white around the iris. She has fought witches and warlocks, psychers with eyes full of glass, mutants with mouths on their hands. But the sound of those bells makes her imagine her fingernails peeling. She hates imagining anything. Get me the cathedral battery, she snaps, and the chancel knights, any sororitas within a day's march. Holt doesn't look away from the barge. His face is a map of calculations. Rhine, you will hold Spine 3 with mines and men. Every Auspex threshold is a tripwire. Anything that walks without a beating heart is mulch. The doctor speaks softly. He sounds delighted, which is not comforting. At last, he says, a visible symptom. The first impacts reach the quarantine limits. Guard squads fire and reload until their fingers are clicks. Hazard shells burst into phosphor grey rain. The cloud splits into smaller clouds, yelping around the circle like wolves that remember a fence. A shape bigger than Doctrine moves behind the miasma. It hums like meat in a hive of bees. It laughs as if it has learned to laugh from children. The doctor watches its silhouette, like a surgeon checking a scar. He sees the geometry of a ritual, grafting to the city's lines. He sees where they're going to cut. He turns. His hands are steady again in the way of people who have little left to save. He looks at Varro, at Holt, at the blank, at the girl by the ration crates, who has decided not to cough because she feels superstition in her bones. I can excise the tumour, he says. Define excise, Holt says, not unkind. Cut out the part that makes the rest die. You can do that to a city, Varro asks. Anatomy is anatomy, he says. Hives are bodies. Plagues are jokes that think they are gods. You are all very serious about both. The blank takes a half step closer. At what cost? A ledger is unnecessary, the doctor says. You pay, it pays, I pay. That is how cures work. Varro studies the device at the circle's edge. The broken crystal pulses in time with the bells, then stutters against them like a tongue against a cracked tooth. She recognizes a thing without knowing its name. It is a no that makes a yes worse. You will not deploy unsanctioned engines without my warrant, she says. Warrants are paper, the doctor says. Plagues are ink. Enough, Holt says, because he is drowning in a military way, which is slower than the civilian kind. What do you need to cut? The doctor gestures toward the hulk lowering over Spine 3. I need to get inside that. Varro laughs. It is a bark of disbelief she disinfects as it escapes. That is a temple to an idea that eats surgeons, she says. You cannot get inside Death Guard doctrine. I do not intend to get inside their doctrine, the doctor says. I intend to get inside their machine. Machines, however decorated, are shy about their seams. The Hospitaller clears her throat under her mask. If he can cut, we should hold the line while he does. If he cannot, we die as pious examples. Holt looks at the white-gloved hand on the steel case. He glances at the blank. The Nuzlocke is useful, and Holt prefers useful company. He glances at Varro, whose eyes are knives. Then he looks at the doctor, who is a problem shaped like a solution. We give him a corridor, Holt says. A knife line to the barge. Rhine, strip your reserves. Varro does not yield. She calibrates. We do it under my icon, she says. We do it with sisters at his shoulder and a null at his back. If he breaks a law I recognize, I cut off his hands. If he breaks one I do not, I learn it and cut faster. The doctor tilts his head like a bird hearing earthworms under leaves. I dislike oversight. It wastes time. You dislike dying, Varro says. One of us will be right, and we will find out which in the doing. The ground shudders. The hulk reaches the height of the taller hab stacks. Its hull splits like a grin. A ramp blossoms forth and a carpet of boxwalkers, flesh separating under tattered work clothes, puddles down in worship of the city. A figure in armor the color of sick leaves steps onto the ramp. Bells ring from his antlers. He raises a bell and it stops in the air before it starts to swing. The sound comes anyway. Blessed be the wet breath, he says, voice amplified, sweet. Blessed be the cough without end. Varro raises her bolt pistol. It looks small. She does not lower it. Holt's comms spit sparks. Chancel Knights inbound in 7, a voice says. Cathedral batteries are lit and sinning. Ryan's voice accompanies the next tremor. Mines at Spine 3 ready. Command detonations on your mark. Holt looks at the doctor. The mask reflects a barge, a bell, a city, and Holt's own face, thinner in the curve. My mark, Holt says to the Vox. Wait for the medicine. The doctor steps out of the circle. The silver line crawls backward, a snake returning to the jar. He plants the brass frame in his satchel. He whispers to it, not affectionately, but like a ward you repeat, so your hand doesn't tremble. He places his gloved fingers on the cured man's shoulder. The patient, empty and obedient, turns with liquid compliance. The doctor nods once. Walk, he tells him, pointing at the plague barge. Go home. The cured walks forward into gunfire without fear, because fear requires futures. He moves at a steady pace, an arrow fletched with calm. Boxwalkers around him tilt their heads, sniff, and then back away with animal distaste. The doctor watches. He takes notes in his head. He nods, as if a hypothesis has licked his palm. Interesting, he says. They do not like my work. The blank steps to his left shoulder. We are agreed on something, he says. Severin, Varro says, and the blank's name is a nail in the plank. Stay at 2 paces. If he flares, make a hole. Flares, the doctor repeats. What a pretty way to say that loudly. Holt lifts his last pistol and points it at the Hulk as if it cares. Move, he says to all of them. They move. The first corridor is built by bullets and faith. Guardsmen hold lines at the mouth of hab lanes, while servitors lift bulkheads into place by the grace of old code. Sisters of battle in black armor and white tabards kneel in staggered positions and let their voices become ranges for bold shells. The hymns are short because there isn't time for long ones. The doctor hears them as a mosquito hears glass. He works at the edge of the corridor, not inside it. He steps into side alleys that smell like brass and childhood. He leaves scratches on door lintels that change the way the fog flows. He pries up drain covers and drops vials into the dark, then listens to how they break. He maps a city the way he maps thoracic cavities, with lines of pressure and points of silence. Poxwalkers lunge in dumb reverence. The doctor touches them and they lie down. Some rise again as cured, quiet as winter. Some do not. The doctor does not mourn. He records. Each touch shakes his wrist as if something inside is knocking to come out. He flexes his fingers against that tapping. It's a request, polite so far. Severin, the blank stays near. Where he stands, the fog falters. It licks his ankles and finds no purchase. It moves away with offended dignity. Your absence is useful, the doctor says. Do not take it personally. I am not equipped to, Severin replies. Barrow walks a step behind and to the right, the position of a partner you do not trust. Her rosette taps against her chest plate like a metronome. The Hospitaller keeps count of heartbeats she can actually hear. Your doctrine, Varro says between bursts. Does it have a book, a master, a founder, a creed? It has an object, the doctor says. When I cut it out, I see what it wasn't. Not an answer. The only answer. The rest is commentary. They breach the first barricade at Spine 3. Ryan meets them, his coat soaked to the knees in water used to trick spores into settling. He looks as if someone has told a joke without letting him hear the setup. Governor's corridor is holding, Ryan says. Cathedral batteries made the Hulk blink. It looked at us, and then looked away. That felt worse. It is preoccupied, the doctor says. It is building an organ. I hate that sentence, Ryan says. The ramp is close now. The bells sound nearer and further in the same breath. The armor on the ramp brutes is mottled with fat that sweats when they stand still. A noxious blightbringer blows a horn and a half-dozen guardsmen vomit without warning, then die quietly of shame. The doctor steps into view, like a man requests a table at a public house. The figure on the ramp tilts his head. The bells hush for a heartbeat. "And what are you?" the figure asks, voice a garden woven from grave worms. A little crow with a beak to match. "I am a doctor," the doctor says. "You are unwell." The figure laughs and the ramp's rust laughs with him. "Everything is unwell," he sighs. "That is the blessing. We are remission." "You are a symptom," the doctor replies. "I cut those out." The blightbringer raises the horn again. Varro squeezes her trigger. The bolt shell takes the horn and most of the face with it. The blightbringer falls like a struck bell. "Advance," Holt orders across the Vox, because sometimes pageantry is secondary to timing. They run the last 20 meters as if they are 3 years. Poxwalkers pour out of ruptured pump lines. The doctor's hand meets 34 heads in a minute and a half. His shoulder shakes as if he's been asked to carry an old friend. The null eases the way, turning Witchfire into a sulk. Varro's pistol hangs from her wrist on a lanyard, and her sword is a stake that grows fire. The ramp accepts them because arrogance is a door that opens the wrong way. Inside the Hulk, the air is thick with the medicinals gone rotten. It smells like church wine and cough syrup mixed in a child's cup. The walls sweat. The sweat is not liquid you can drink. The doctor's lenses fog. He wipes them with a cloth that knows more diseases than some planets. He sees the organ at once. It pulses in the belly of the ship. A heart built of grafted vesicles and stolen vats. A beating laboratory. Tubes run from it into the city through the ramp, beading and feeding. "Gross pump," the doctor says, delighted. So simple. Severin's expression does not change, which is good, because it never does. Varro looks at him, then at the organ. She feels the wrongness like a coin under her tongue. "What cuts it?" she asks. The doctor takes the brass framework from his satchel and fits new plates onto it, as if assembling a toy. He cracks a vial with his teeth and pours it along the device like anointing oil. He lays the framework against the tube. The tube recoils. The framework hums. "It will stop," the doctor says. "Then it will roar. Then it will stop properly." "And if it roars too long?" Varro asks. "We roar back," he says. "I have a very loud voice." The first hum rises like a throat clearing. The walls of the Hulk answer with a deeper tone. When the tones meet, there is a beat of silence so smooth, it feels like kindness. Then the pumps buck. Outside, on Spine 3, the fog above the ramp jumps like a rug pulled out. A dozen poxwalkers drop with their heads turned entirely around as if a child wanted to see behind them. A blightspawn's bile pump bursts and showers its friends in a blessing they cannot metabolize. Holt hears the city breathe. It is not metaphor. The air moves through old ducts as if returning to a habit it had forgotten. He takes the breath like it is his. "Hold," he says, and the men around him hold because he can still say it like a prayer. Inside, the organ convulses again. A pipe near Varro splits and sprays green. The Hospitaller throws her white glove over the split and clamps down with a noise like a struck piano string. "It burns," she says in a mild, informative way. "Everything worth killing does," Varro replies. Severin steps forward, and the noise in the room drops half a tone. The organ flinches. The brass framework bites deeper. The device's light goes from dirty white to a color that never happens in nature. The doctor's shoulder tenses. The tapping inside his arm becomes pounding. The instrument in his hand becomes very heavy, as if it is remembering gravity properly for the first time. He smiles. It is not visible, but it is real. You will stop now. The pump stops. The Hulk groans the way ships do in old songs. Bells break. Something like a voice whispers across the hull in the language of mold. The first roar begins. It comes from outside the hull and from under the skin. Citizens in Habs 3 kilometers away scratch their arms and do not know why. A sister halfway down the ramp thinks of her childhood fever and misrecites a line of prayer she can usually do in her sleep. Holt's adjutant stares at a panel that reads all green and feels like she should drop her eyes anyway. Varro looks at the doctor. He is not shaking while it roars. He shakes when it stops. He pulls the framework free. It comes away with a sound like the end of a song. The organ sags, then firms, then gives up with a sigh that smells like boiled leather. Done, the doctor says. The Hulk bucks as if insulted. It vomits bile cannons from the ceiling and tries to drown him in what he just taught it not to make. Varro and Severin move without cue. The Null takes in the bile sorcery like a lake takes a stone. Varro takes the bile's physics with a blade that has cut both sinners and friends. Holt's Vox carries the next order like a seed. Rhine, he says, voice even. Now. The mines at Spine 3 detonate in a line. The ramp shivers, slips and breaks, taking a sheet of poxwalkers with it. They fall without the dignity of falling. They spatter as if embarrassed. The cathedral batteries open up. They do not so much fire as sermonize. The shells are homilies on cleanliness. The Hulk listens with bad grace and then folds the discussion closed like a book. Pull, Varro orders. We have cut the tendon. We do not die in the mouth. They withdraw through air that hates them. The Hulk's hull vents scream after them. The doctor pauses once, mid-retreat, to touch a leaking bulkhead with 2 fingers and mutter, "Hush," the way one does to a baby in a market. The leak slows. He nods. They reach the ramp's cusp as it tilts. Varro and the Hospitaller jump to the raised hab plate, land in blessed dirt-colored dust. Severin falls like a coat thrown at a hook and catches. The doctor steps off without visible preparation and lands with a sound like a book closing. Behind them, the ramp drops the rest of the way. The Hulk lists. It does not fall. It is too proud. The fog around Spine 3 draws back like water recoiling from soap. It leaves behind citizens who forgot to breathe. They begin again, all at once, like a choir that missed its cue and decided to own it. Holt meets them at the base with his cap off. It is not deference, it is air. He looks at the doctor in a way he says for men who make his job easier and harder simultaneously. You bought us a day, Holt says. I bought you an hour, the doctor says. Do not spend it on speeches. Varro regards the organ slicks on the doctor's gloves. There is a tremor there that is not fatigue. It is a rhythm chosen by something not in the room. What price did you pay? She asks. In the doing. Another day's interest, he says lightly. The debt collects. To whom? To the hole I made to come here. Holt decides not to hear that yet. Rhine, he says. Report. Rhine's voice is a rack of blades hung on a nail. The drift thinned over Spine 3. We saw it hurd away from the cathedral's exhaust. Chancel Knights held the north leg. Casualty figures in triple digits. May the throne sit heavier. Death Guard forces are reorienting. Their main body halted at Baffle Gate. They are choosing a new door. Varro turns to the horizon, as if it can take an order. They do not retreat, she says. They learn. If they learn that we can choke the pump, they will submit a different organ. Holt's adjutant, voice careful, adds the weight. August picks something large moving behind the Hulk. Not ship large, city large, but tall. The doctor's is a small candle flame. Yes, he says, a physician of their own. Varro's eyes narrow. You persist in defining enemies as colleagues. We are in the same trade, he says. We disagree on outcomes. Holt looks from the doctor to the sky to the city's edge. He straightens without thinking, the way men straighten before they are asked to speak to too many people. This is how it stands, he says, voice pitched for more ears than hear. We have held a line and cut a thing that fed them. We go to war with a priestly pest we can now name. Inquisitor Varro holds sanction. The doctor has a rope to pull. The doctor inclines his head, as if at a compliment he didn't request. You will follow my order of battle, Varro says to him. You will not deploy, whatever that is. She points at the satchel. Without my hand on your wrist. You can put your hand on my wrist, he says. It will not change the pulse. Then I will squeeze until it does, she replies. You will say thank you when it works. The Hospitaller watches them and thinks, as she often does, that people who save lives hate each other like cousins. She tightens the glove on her burned hand and hides the shake. Holt's vox cracks. Governor, Ryan says, we have eyes on a palanquin, big as a chapel. It is carried by what I can only call faith-made meat. Varro's mouth goes unpleasantly thin. They brought a throne, she says, and the thing upon it. The doctor tilts his head. He hears the bells change key. A new smell arrives, sweet, almost kind, like bread in a plague house. It is love sideways. He looks at Holt. He looks at Varro. He looks at the girl by the ration crates, who has not coughed again. He nods to her. She nods back because children file away miracles even when told not to. The incision was correct, he says. The disease will respond with a bruise. It will push out. We go in again. Varro studies the brass framework in his hand. It is bruised too. You will give me a shiver, doctor, she says. You will teach me where to hold you and where to let go. I will cut where you point, he says, if you do not point at me. Holt puts his cap back on, because it is time to be seen. Plan, he says. Make one before the bells finish that sentence. The vox hums with the weight of new data. Ryan's voice drops an octave. Death Guard vanguard pivoting to Cathedral Row. Pox artillery setting up along furnaces. Palanquin vectoring toward Procession Avenue. They mean to consecrate the manufactorums. Varro sketches the path in the air, lines and junctions, arteries and valves. The doctor watches the shape like a lover memorizing a face. Severin stands still enough to go untranslated. Their organ of worship will bleed power into work, the doctor says. Their God's joy is making you call poison a product. Holt's jaw tightens. Over my bones, he says. You won't be asked, Varro says. They don't ask. The bells complete their clause. The city answers, not with a bell, but with a factory whistle left over from a century no one remembers fondly. 1,000 machine prayers start at once. The manufactora wake to a liturgy that is not their own. The doctor breathes in and smiles without pleasure. Yes, he says softly, almost to himself. We will cut again then. A runner stumbles in, limping on one leg, eyes too big. He salutes Varro and curses himself for doing it badly. Inquisitor, he pants. Priesthood of the cathedral refuses to evacuate. They say the smoke is sanctified. They've locked a gate. Varro does not sigh. The habit was beaten out of her before she understood why. Of course they have, she says. Brother seers always prefer a burn they chose to one they did not. Holt almost laughs. It sticks, and he swallows it like a pill. We pry the gate open. We pull them out. If they fight us, we drag them and beg forgiveness later. The doctor looks toward the cathedral and imagines the organ that loves it. He feels the tap in his arm become a scratch. He avoids scratching. It is unclean and a metaphor. Governor, Varro says, I assume command of spiritual assets under Article Purity 7. Holt nods because arguing wastes time he refuses to spend. Take them, he says. Bring back what is necessary. And you, Varro says to the doctor, will see what we are not seeing. I will see, he says. You will decide. They move fast because time now has a taste and it is not kind. At the cathedral perimeter, the gate is chained with iron and conviction. Brothers of the ecclesiarchy stand with censers and flails, chests out, eyes wild with love. They smell like incense and fear under incense. Stand aside, Varro says. She holds up her rosette. Legal fiction glows as if it is not. This is sanctified air, the High Adept declares, voice trembling with borrowed courage. It cannot be polluted by your innovations. You are breathing the enemy, Varro says not loudly. I will beat it out of you if I must. The doctor watches them speak in the dialect of ownership. He lets them. He walks to the gate and touches a bar with one finger. He nods, as if the iron confided a secret. Put your null here, he says, marking a point with the chalk that takes on whatever color the surface hates. Severin places his absence there. Rust falls from the chain like dandruff. The gate's conviction loosens because belief is an energy, and energies drain. Varro signals a sister. The chain breaks. The gate opens like a held breath released. Priests start to shout prophecy. Varro walks through them without touching. The Hospitaller apologizes in case apology has wings. Inside, the cathedral is a machine built of worship. Every pipe has a hymn. Every switch has a prayer. The massive nave trembles with the thunder of batteries that learn to be guns because someone told them a story about being guns. The doctor sees the fault. A set of thurable vents in the transept blowing across the nave at a wrong pitch. He sets the brass framework against a vent and tunes it like a string. The wrongness slows, not stopping, but refusing to sprint. Good, he says. Now we will not die as we look. Varro faces the High Adept on the dais. She does not climb the steps. She limits the height difference politely. You will turn your machines to fire at the palanquin, she says. These are not, he starts. They are, she says. If they can burn that. If we burn the palanquin, he says, and thus an aspect of the sacred rot, are we not? You will not complete the sentence, Varro says mildly. It is a crime. He swallows, then nods like it hurts at the joints. He signals. Relays clack. Sacred switches admit blasphemy. The batteries swivel like animals smelling blood they were denied at birth. Doctor, Varro says, not turning. Is your ledger satisfied with that? Ledgers are never satisfied, he says. We keep writing until they are too tired to argue. The palanquin rounds Procession Avenue. It is borne on the backs of beings whose names are pious jokes. It bears a shape that smiles the way fruit smiles when it molds. It does not hurry. It has the etiquette of inevitability. Holt's voice is steady. On my mark, he says. 3, 2, 1. The cathedral guns speak. They tell the palanquin a story about fire that is old and has all the wrong heroes. The first shells land and turn the air into glass. The palanquin judders and then reclines into the bombardment like a fat cat into a warm lap. It is listening, the doctor says. It is also laughing. Good, Varro says. I like them to do one thing at a time. The palanquin answers with a burp that peels paint. The manufactorium lines down Avenue 7 reverse. Soot sighs back into chimneys. Workers drop to their knees and retch out the names of their grandparents. They do not know those names. They come out anyway, warm and wrong. The doctor bites a strip of leather. He does not need to. Habits comfort witnesses. We will cut at the wheel, he says. Where the bearers place their faith, you will point me. Varro points. It is not symbolic. She points at a particular spoke on a particular axle where the wood remembers a prayer. We will need that hour you bought us, she says. He nods. The tapping in his arm has become a rhythm he can almost hum to. He hums anyway, quietly. It is almost pretty. They step back into the nave's soot. Men and women of faith clear a path because orders clear paths faster than sympathy. The Hospitaler's burned hand bleeds inside the glove. She keeps the glove white. Outside, the city inhales, holds, and waits for the exhale to decide whether to be a scream or a song. The city exhales. The breath is smoke and prayer and the metallic tang of fear. On Procession Avenue, the palanquin's shadow moves like a spill. The bearers' backs ripple as if worms turned under skin to keep the pace. Wheel, the doctor says. Cut at trust. Varro points again. That spoke. Sisters of battle kneel into the gutter and brace their bolters along the curb like a choir sighting down black salters. Guardsmen in hazard capes lock shields, ratcheting them tight until the line becomes a rib cage. The Hospitaler runs, white glove bright against brick, laying sigil salts that hiss where the fog tries to lick them away. Severin steps into the avenue's crown, and the air forgets to hum. The bells falter into a sulk. The doctor unslings the brass framework and sinks a rod between cobbles where Varro indicated. He cracks 2 vials along its spine and pats the frame twice, as if calming a horse that's never seen fire. The device wakes wrong, then right. The mercury he pours finds a seam and runs for it like a rumour. Hold your breath, he says to no one. Holt's voice marks time. Cathedral, walk your fire. Scour the flanks and spare the spoke. Rhine, smoke and flash front, mines back, then clear for the push. The first salvo breaks a crust off the palanquin's blessing. Green fire beads, weeps, and slides. The bearers grunt in contentment. They warp their bones to better serve. Go, Varro says. And they go. The cured walk first. 10 of them, quiet, empty, obedient. They move with the evenness of metronomes into air made of old breath. Poxwalkers recoil in a childlike shudder. Whatever complex disgust they still own saves living men a minute of dying. Behind the cured, guardsmen advance in 2 ranks with sand-fed boots. They hook pikes under grasping arms and step past. Sisters stitch explosive punctuation into the gutters to keep bodies from becoming walls. Rhine's sappers slide charges under broken pilaster bases, their fingers precise, their faces bored because fear wastes time. The doctor drifts along the column's inner edge. He marks brick with chalk and vinegar that turns the fog into wet paper. He scatters little glass seeds into drains. When the palanquin's breath draws, the seeds pop and release a throat medicine that tastes like obedience. The miasma curls away, insulted. They reach the wheel. Up close, the spoke is carved with tiny faces smiling the wrong size. The wood sweats. The axle tree hums a note that makes teeth itch. The doctor sets the brass frame into the hub, whispering arithmetic. Severin stands at his shoulder and leans absence into the machine until the hum drops by a hair. The palanquin notices. A herald on the litter turns its head. It has the kindness of a fever that stays through the night. It raises a hand in blessing, and a sister's ribbon of hair grays in an instant. Varro flicks her sword to knock the blessing aside. It bites steel and complains like a child denied a toy. Flares, she says to Severin. Severin makes the air boring. The blessing goes looking for poetry and finds none. It sulks against stone. The doctor pushes. The framework bites. The mercury line completes a ring only he sees. He hums one note that answers the axle tree's pitch and then spoils it, as if he is whispering the wrong word into the right wedding. The spoke stops. The palanquin lurches. The bearers cry out in surprised piety. The litter's bells trill into a laugh and choke on it. The axle tree groans as if a thick secret were being forced through a narrow throat. Now, Holt says, sappers touch their studs. Pillars along the avenue die in clouds of powder that smell like ground teeth. The palanquin's left side sinks 2 hands' breadth, then a palm, then a hand again as bearers shift and fail. The wheel bites a broken curb and skews. Grapnels, Ryan barks. Lines thwack. Hooks bite the palanquin's flanks like angry fishermen. Men bend like reeds and stand like walls. Sisters push. The herald tries to bless and ends up clapping. The doctor pulls the rod free and slaps the frame. Roar, he tells it. It does. The hub sings wrong. The spoke forgets why it stands. The bearing spits out a lump of grease that is also a prayer kneaded with fat. Severin's lack eats the prayer. The grease lands on the stones like an apology. The wheel cracks. The litter leans like a drunk saint and then slides. It crunches over its own reliquaries and sheds a shower of icons that smell like butter and graves. The herald reaches for dignity and grabs bile instead. Down, Varro says, and the city obeys her tone. Men duck. Sisters brace. The palanquin tips, hangs, thinks about pride, then remembers gravity as a rule not to be broken today. It goes over slow and mean. It lands with a soft colossal thud that shakes the story out of the avenue stones. The bearers fold under it like guilty thoughts. The herald's mask cracks. Something kind looks out and is embarrassed to be seen. It tries to laugh and coughs. Varro fires twice. Kindness turns to paste. Holt lowers his pistol. He does not smile. He notes where his men stand and where they fell and how many he can still use to build the next line. Ryan breathes out the breath a man saved for after this exact thing. Secure. Cut anything that wriggles, he says. His men obey. They are good at it. The fog draws back a lane's width and watches with interest. The doctor steps onto the fallen wheel. He taps the cracked hub with 2 knuckles and listens. He nods, the nod of a carpenter satisfied with a joint. The tapping in his arm becomes a steady beat, the rhythm of debt collecting. He squeezes his gloved hand once, twice. He does not grimace. He simply counts. Codex note. Palanquins of the plague cult distribute faith pressure through engraved spokes. A misphased anchor at the hub induces a resonance inversion, causing devotional load to cancel and the bearing to idle under worship. The cured stand in a row at the curb, heads canted, hands folded, oblivious to celebration. A sister looks at them as if at candles that refuse to go out. The hospitaller checks their pulses and finds them clean, regular, quiet. After, Varro says to her, as if the question were asked. We discuss after. After, the hospitaller agrees, as if it were a prayer. They pull back in good order. The air behind them fills with small flies that find no purchase on vinegar or null. The city over their shoulders looks marginally less doomed, which is often enough to make a war last long enough to matter. In the cathedral's chapter house, Holt stands at a slate table that used to hold relics and now holds maps and ration figures. Candles gutter in antique sconces because smoke prefers to leave its mark on sacred walls. A servo skull hovers, quill out, writing without being asked. Ryan points at the avenue with a boot knife. We cut their ceremony. We bled their momentum. They'll stop using palanquins at range and move to ground play. Expect blight haulers, armored pressure. They'll press the manufacturer's outer ring. We have an hour, Holt says. We spend it on choking points and power redirections. Not heroic stands. Not yet. Varro places the inquisitorial rosette on the table. It stares back at them all like a small, judging eye. A victory, she allows. Now for its price. Eyes slide to the cured, visible in the chapter house's side aisle through a mesh gate. They sit on benches like choir boys waiting to sing. They do not speak to one another. They do not fidget. They are hearts with no decisions. The Hospitaller folds her burned hand in her good one. They obey commands lightly, she says. They eat if placed before food. They do not starve themselves. They do not speak. She looks at the doctor. Is this health? The doctor does not stand at the table. He stands in the door's shadow like a man preferring columns. It is absence of pestilence, he says. That is my remit. Absence, Varro says, is not life. Life, he corrects, is not your remit. The air thins for a second as Severin's head turns. He does not speak. His presence reminds them what absence can do to a room. Holt runs his tongue along a cracked tooth and decides to steelman the thing he dislikes. They are not contagious, he says. They stabilize inside the lines we can defend. They do not panic or riot. They are cheap to keep in a siege that matters. Varro nods once in appreciation of the argument properly made. They are also the walking argument for our enemy's sermons, she counters. The Death Guard preach release from fear. What is a citizen without will but a sermon taught through our hands? The Hospitaller stares at the mesh. We save their lives, she says softly. Is that not enough on the day? On the day, Varro grants. What about the day after? You cannot make a city of quiet men and call it piety. The doctor says nothing. He watches the candle's smoke trace patterns in eddies by the ceiling. His gloved fingers flex once. The tapping in his arm keeps thoughtful time. Holt looks from the mesh to the doctor to Varro. We are out of calories, he says flatly. We can't feed arguments. We can feed men who stand when told and don't collapse. If they can lift a rifle, they're assets. Varro's gaze sharpens. We do not arm the cured, she says. We do not blur the line. Lines blur under bombardment, Holt replies. I need bodies that hold a corridor while sappers finish a line. I won't use children. I won't send old men. These, he nods to the mesh. They don't feel fear. They don't feel anything. Sometimes a city survives because someone didn't feel at the wrong time. Ryan lifts a palm. Practical proposal, he says, as if filing a motion. They haul. Sandbags, ammo, wounded. They stack, they ferry. They hold a rope and don't let go when the screaming starts. No weapons, no orders beyond logistics. Priests track them. Hospitaller oversees them. If any act wrong, we extract them. Varro's mouth tightens at the verb. Extract, she repeats. Speak plain. Mercy kill, Ryan says, unblinking. One shot, no spectacle. I'll make the rule ugly now so men don't make it uglier later. The Hospitaller closes her eyes a heartbeat. I will do it, she says quietly, if it needs doing. Varro's eyes cut to the doctor. And you, is this acceptable doctrine? Doctrine is your word, he says. I have work. If the quiet carry stones and stop flies touching the wounded, good. If you must put them down, do it clean. You are infectious when messy. Thank you, Varro says, not grateful, for giving moral instruction in my house. The servo skull skitters the quill faster, as if eager to keep up with human heat. Holt claps his hands once. Settled, he says. Cured carry, no weapons. Hospitaller command. If a cured endangers the line, the Hospitaller grants euthanacy with inquisitorial purview. He holds Varro's eye until she gives the smallest nod that turns a policy into law. Ryan taps another position on the map. They regroup here at the furnace break. Expect to push with blight engines. We need an ugly surprise they haven't priced in. The doctor's head tilts. He taps the avenue with one finger, then the manufactorium vents with another, then the cathedral's rear sacristy. You have a wind, he says. You have pipes. You have a stomach with a sore. We convince the soreness to reverse. Plain, Holt says. We boil their breath, the doctor says. Push it back down their throats with your bells. Not the pretty ones, the loud ones. Holt glances to a red-robed engineer brought up from the battery decks, his mechadendrites clicking like irritated knitting. Margot's Tertius? Tertius's Vox grill fizzes, then bursts a voice like a cable being dragged over stone. Cathedral organ registers can be overpressured, the Magos confirms. Risk of pipe rupture is statistically significant. Sacrilege quotient is unsavory. A long pause. Acceptable. Varro signs it with one downslash of 2 fingers. Do it. If we pop a pipe, we write that hymn into the next pipe's metal and call it a relic. The servo skull scribbles faster. The doctor's gloved hand tightens around the satchel strap. The tapping pounds, then subsides. He tastes copper for a second and swallows it. One more thing, he says. Their surgeon will come. Surgeon? Ryan asks. Distaste native and undisguised. Every cult has a lover of knives, the doctor says. Yours carves mercy into rot. Theirs carves rot into mercy. We have already insulted his craft. He will answer concept with concept. Varro's bead clicks. A Vox officer outside the chamber leans into a storm and deranges it enough to speak. Inquisitor, she says. Voice clipped by static. New contact. Significant. Armor signa match. Death Guard support cadre. We have a signature. Unknown pattern. Belching. Chanting. Sounds like an apothecarian. And the chapel had a child. Holt's eyes narrow. Show me. The hololith coughs a ghost above the table. A shape in baroque plate. Its pauldrons horned with racks of glass organs. Its backpack a stained glass apothecary spewing lamp-lit fumes. Chains bind suturing tools in a slow halo. A flock of plague drones circles him like flies with theology. Name, Varro says. Ryan answers from a briefing he hoped not to use. Plague surgeon. Title varies. This one's retinue calls him the Cantor of Phlegm. Auspex tags, filth saints, tallymen, putrefiers. He sings while he cuts. Of course he does, Varro mutters. The Cantor's vox-loud voice slides through the cathedral stone as if it enjoys the pause. Little crow, it croons, sweet as decay. We heard your scalpel scratch. We have brought you a second opinion. The doctor's lenses reflect the hololith smear. He makes a small sound of satisfaction. Good, he says. He speaks my language. The hollow shivers. The Cantor inflates his chest and exhales a mist that behaves like a thesis. Where it touches air, smells flip. Vinegar sweetens, incense sours. Steel smells like old milk. A sister, lower on the transept, steps into the mist and forgets why her armor is heavy. She keeps breathing and loses count. Holt's jaw goes iron. We need doors and killing lanes, he says. Ryan, already laying, Ryan clips. But listen, they all do. The cathedral timbers creak softly. The candles tremble. The cured in the mesh aisle turn their heads in unison toward the hololith and tilt like birds. The Hospitaler's mouth tightens. They hear him, she says. They are not deaf. Varro draws her sword a hand's breadth and shuts it. Containment protocol. The cured remain behind grilled doors. Sister preachers read litany over them. If they echo words, we reclassify. The doctor watches the cured's hands. They do not clutch. They do not reach. They simply fold more neatly, fingers aligning as if summoned to a better arrangement. Power scaling interlude. The Cantor's aura is not merely toxin. It is a definition engine that reassigns meanings to bodily states. If the Doctor's cure encodes finality, quietus, as absence of pestilence, the Cantor proposes a rival axiom, quiescence as ripeness. Under that axiom, stillness becomes a vector, compliance a conduit. The Doctor's tools rely on fixed grammars of corruption and cleanliness. The Cantor's hymn rewrites grammar mid-sentence. Severin's null blunts chant energy but also flattens the Doctor's anchor harmonics, forcing overvoltage and debt accrual whenever the device resists. Varro reads the shape of the threat the way she reads sin. He attacks the meaning, she says. He'll make your cure into a vessel. Only if I let him, the Doctor replies. Or if I am tired. Holt sets his palms flat on the table. He will come for you, he says. He'll walk our corridors to your door. We make that door an abattoir. Ryan grins without enjoying it. Yes, Governor. Not just bullets, the Doctor says. He eats bullets as roughage. He suffers boredom. Give him repetition and he will find a way to be creative. Force him to walk clean lines. Make his feet itch. Clean, Ryan says. We are losing bleach. Use ash, the Doctor says. Use lye, boil water. Line the halls with soap. Put down white sheets. Make him step on hospitals. Varro understands at once. Make him profane what he claims, she says. Make every advance a blasphemy. The engine sear makes a sound like a laugh forgotten by metal. I will redirect boiler venting to wash corridors in steam, Tertius says. We will brush him. Add chimes, the Hospitaller says suddenly. Not bells, little glass chimes, children's. Break them when he passes. Holt doesn't ask why. He sees eyes in the room go hard. Do it. They build the hall. The corridor from the transept to the sacristy becomes a bright white-tiled wound. Sisters scrub with powdered bone until the grout squeaks. Guardsmen drag iron tubs to boil water and feed the tubs with sacred manuscripts, whose saints would rather burn than watch this. Steam gathers in a genteel fog that smells like a laundress's rebellion. White sheets go down. The cured, under Hospitaller command, carry stacks of linen like acolytes bearing offerings. They lay the cloth mutually straight. When their hands shake, it is because the cloth is heavy, not because they remember to be afraid. Varro walks the corridor once. The chimes whisper like polite ghosts above her head. If he silences them, she says, we move to blades. Sisters nod their consent to die near music. The Cantor arrives with a small parade. Tallymen clatter a bachi that drip small green pearls. Putrefiers juggle vials like lit candles. Blight drones buzz a baritone that politics the air. He looks at the white halls and squeals in delight. Drapes, he sings. A theatre. For me. You shouldn't have. Advance, Holt orders, calm as arithmetic. The first rank of guardsmen fire on the downbeat. Larson's solid shot stitch the air. 2 drones fall in pieces that try to sing longer and fail. A putrefier explodes into a shower of jokes. The Cantor laughs and the jokes land with broken spines. He steps onto the sheet. The chime above him tinkles and shatters. The sound is small and brutal. Sisters stiffen and look at one another. The chime on the next span breaks. The Cantor's grin widens and becomes a rictus of rapture. He sings. The song says, stillness is ripeness, cleanliness is seasoning, sheets are shrouds laid early to teach a body the shape of the end. The song says, a doctor's hand is a midwife of rot. It is a tender song. It wants to hold. The first line wavers. Severin moves forward into the chimes. He is an insult to music. The song hits him and goes around sulky. The notes drip off him as if ashamed. The Doctor steps to the edge of the white without stepping onto it. He holds the brass frame like a metronome. He taps the rod against the arch thrice, then holds the device to his chest like a salter. Countersuture, he says. The device hums the dirty white that made the wheel forget. The chimes that have not broken yet sway and begin to ring on their own, answering a beat older than the cantor's tune. The song stumbles. The cantor checks his pitch, amused. Second opinion, the cantor trills. He exhales a cloud that seeks clean skin. The steam answers by condensing into droplets that fall heavy, dragging the mist down to sheet level. Lie bites it. The white browns. Sisters weep without noisiness and keep shooting. Guardsmen chamber, press, fire, chamber, press, fire. Ryan keeps score with a small holy charm at his belt, moving beads for each man that still breathes. The cantor's clerks throw vials. They bloom into little biological conjectures. The device in the doctor's hands drinks the conjecture's rhetoric and leaves behind bare toxin. The hospitaller shouts dosages over her shoulder. How much vinegar to break that acid? How much ash to bind that gel? How much water to carry that heat away without scalding men into weakness? Varro advances with two sisters. Her sword's flame licks the chime cords and refuses to catch. She reaches the front rank and sees the cantor's visor. A stained glass window depicting a smiling child with a bandage. She wants to punch the glass. She waits for a cleaner option. The chimes shatter one by one like bones in an old story. The cantor laughs for each, a tally of obscene joy. He steps farther into the white, and the white goes off color under his boots. He sings as if baptizing the floor. Doctor, Varro says, is this the part where your doctrine earns its blasphemy? Yes, he says, this is the part. He steps onto the sheet. The tapping in his arm becomes a knock. The knock becomes a demand. He holds the frame one-handed, and with the other he reaches, gloved and precise, for the air around the cantor's mouth. He finds the song's seam. He pinches it between thumb and forefinger. He twists. The cantor coughs. He coughs as if surprised that he can be rude in public. He coughs again, and a small green knot falls from his lip into the sheet where it sizzles and fails to argue. He looks at the doctor with the warm hurt of a man interrupted at his favorite book. You, he says delighted. You know the words. I know which ones not to say. The doctor replies. The cantor's laugh modulates into admiration. Let me see your hands, he croons. No, the doctor says. The cantor opens his arms as if offering an embrace. From under his pauldrons, iron-wrapped arms unfold, each with a tool at the end. Bone saw, trocar, needle, spoon. They click together like a choir admitting they love the chorus. He lunges. Varro moves to intercept and is met by a putrefier's burst. Glass bones sprayed like flak. She interposes her rosette on instinct. The shard that should ruin her eye bounces off the sigil with a small sound like law doing its job. Gratitude later, she snarls and steps around the mess. Severin stands squarely between the cantor and the doctor. The song dies at his chin. The tools stutter. They seek metaphors to cut and find none. The cantor blinks slow, delighted again. A hole, he sings softly. Every this needs a trapdoor. He sways, then slices low. A scalpel glances off Severin's greave and makes a sound like a bad idea leaving a room. The doctor slaps the cantor's wrist. The glove sizzles. The tapping in his arm punches hard enough to make his hand stutter. Ah, the doctor says conversationally. You are interesting. He steps in close. He touches the cantor's breastplate with 2 fingers and says a word that is not a word so much as a tone a person makes when telling a room to shush while a child sleeps. The plate glass set into the chest fogs from within. Hairline cracks venate the saint's smile. The cantor squeals and then hums. He keeps time by slamming a tool into a column. Dust falls like old applause. He reaches for the doctor's mask. Varro steps through, sword a white-hot needle. She slides the blade between two of the Cantor's ribs and twists. Steam breathes from the wound and smells like hospital tea. The Cantor moans in gratitude. "It is very good to be touched when one aches," he whispers, sweet and obscene. Ryan barks. "Step." The front rank shift a foot in unison. The volley goes into the gap, tearing parasites from the Cantor's backpack like ornaments skinned off the heads. Tree. The Cantor moves with offense now, no longer simply delighted. He sides the spoon toward the doctor's wrist. The spoon's bowl is a smile. It wants to scoop. Severin knocks it aside with his absence, which is heavier than iron here. "Pay me," the hole around him seems to say to the warp, and the warp snarls back and refuses. The Cantor feels the refusal and bristles like a virtuoso told to play scales. He exhales a new mist. It is sweet and low and aims at the cured behind the mesh in the side aisle. The cured turn their heads as one. Their fingers uncurl like infants surprised to discover they have an extra hand. They rise, quiet, faces blank, and take a step toward the chimes. "Seal," Varro shouts. The gate slams like the end of a confession. The cured step into iron and stop. The Hospitaler's voice is level. They heard him and stood. They did not obey further. She meets Varro's eyes. For now, Varro agrees. She does not look away from the Cantor. The doctor keeps his two fingers on the plate glass. He taps a rhythm, tap, 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 tap. The cracks widen and join. He leans and whispers, quiet now, the way he did to the leaking pipe. The saint's smile breaks into shards. Behind it is meat that has learned to listen to music. The doctor leans closer still. "No," he says, and means ventilation and liturgy both. He pushes the frame into the hole. The device howls. The chimes above them ring all at once and shatter into 1,000 small resignations. Steam turns to rain that falls heavy enough to bend the Cantor's posture. Severin's null presses in, and the room becomes uninteresting to magic. The Cantor's song finds no purchase. He coughs up another green knot, and a string of words that are the names of obscure plagues. They die on the floor like royalty caught alone. Varro drags her blade up and left and twists. The ribs complain. The apothecary backpack ruptures in a glassy sigh. The fumes inside are deprived of a thesis. They turn into chemical facts and drop. The Cantor staggers a half-meter. Ryan's volley turns his knee into a question. He falls to it. He tries to laugh, tries to make it about surrender, about beauty and gravity, and coughs instead. He looks up at the doctor with affectionate sorrow. "You cure so they cannot sing," he says. "You think that mercy." The doctor inclines his head once. "I think that quiet." The Cantor laughs, really laughs. Not theatre, but a thing with spit in it. "Then hush me," he says. The doctor does. He touches the visor with two fingers and says the word again. Not a word, a tone, a hush. The stained glass saint fogs and collapses. The Cantor's head falls forward like a tired nurse asleep on a ward. He dies gently, which is a violence he would have hated if he could have watched it happen. Silence lands with the weight of spent shells. Holt's voice finds the room's ear. "Status." Rhines counts. Drones down. Putrefiers scattered. Tallymen retreating up their own abachi. Primary target neutral. He breathes once, deep, then adds, "Loss is tolerable." Varro's blade drips apologetically. She wipes it on a sheet that is no longer white and wonders if any sin is ever clean, when done for a necessary reason. The Hospitaler checks the cured behind the gate. They have sat again. Their fingers are folded neatly, almost prim. Their breathing is slow even. She does not smile. She does not cry. She notes, The doctor crouches over the cantor's body and takes out a 3-pronged instrument that looks like a toy and is not. He extracts a vial that did not break, a glass gland with a little hymn captured inside, like a wasp in honey. Varro watches him do it and says nothing, because she has learned that ordering him not to do things wastes the part of her throat that should be used for killing. She simply raises one eyebrow in a shape that means, "Explain later, or I will invent an explanation you will not enjoy." He pockets the vial and stands. The tapping in his arm is now a bruise. He flexes his hand, and it does not quite obey. "Price," Varro says low. "The hole I made laughs," he says. "It enjoys heroism. It assumes I will perform another. Will you?" "Yes," he says. "I am a doctor." Holt takes the moment like a baton. "We won a corridor and kept our cathedral. We made them give back a surgeon. That buys." The cathedral stones shiver. A low roll moves through them like a barrel cart over uneven cobbles. Tertius's mechadendrites whine. "External pressure wave," the Magos reports. "Non-kinetic, liturgical." The hololith flickers back to life uninvited. A shape looms behind the ruin of the palanquin, bigger than a street, smaller than a modest god. It is an engine that crawled out of a parent who died of a long illness and learned to weaponize the grief. Its name is mumbled by the Vox in a way that makes men spit to remove taste. Blight Hauler. Behind it, a pitted mortar carriage trundles on caterpillar limbs and burps plague shells like jokes you tell to make friends at wakes. A new banner sways above them, a cartoon heart with a bandage and a smile, painted by a child who remembers being loved before getting sick. "They bring the hod," Ryan says. "They will lay a road of filth and walk it over us." "We break the road," Holt says. Varro sheathes her blade. The steel sighs into scabbard. She looks at the doctor. "Creative counters," she says. "Controlled collateral." He nods, as if accepting an invitation to dinner. "We will reverse the flow," he says. "We will refuse an idea." The plan is simple enough to speak while men move. Tertius bends the cathedral's back toward the furnaces. He opens vents that have not opened since the last plague 3 generations ago. He reroutes hymn air into work air and pairs them, so that prayer becomes pressure. He writes a litany onto a dial with a grease pencil and decides it is holy, because he says it is. Rhine lays charges along the duct line like rosary beads. He taps each with his knuckle and hears the right echo. He gives sappers the look that takes a father's place before a son's first bad job. Holt positions platoons at the spill points, with fire discipline as liturgy. He is tired of improvising and likes that this plan at least smells like work. Varro requisitions 100 glass bottles from sanctums, reliquaries, kitchens, and the pockets of men who did not think they would be asked. The Hospitaller fills them with vinegar infused with ash, mint, and a scrap of real holy oil that makes the mixture oddly polite. She hands them out with instructions sharp as knives. The doctor climbs into the catwalks above the main duct. He fastens the brass framework across a gate valve like a cuff around a wrist. He traces sigils you only see reflected in mercury. He speaks a phrase that tells vapor to remember being rain. Severin stands at his back like a boring saint. He holds the air plane. The device's hungry note sinks into a hum even machines respect. "On your mark," Varro says into the bead. The blight hauler bellies up to the cathedral's throat like a pig given a trough. The mortar haws a shell into its mouth that has been written a poem about empathy. The banner sways, friendly. "Now," Holt says. The cathedral breathes out. Heat and wet, and the old taste of incense washed down ducts through vents into the faces of machines that try to redefine air. The pressure wave finds the miasma and turns it into soup. The soup finds the hauler's intake and becomes the snake. The snake goes up the wrong pipe and bites the machine's brain. Ryan's charges go off in a stagger that sounds like cautious applause. Relief hatches pop along the duct line in sequence, venting excess where it will scald no one. Sisters throw vinegar bottles into the wave. They shatter and make the steam bite like a patient humour. The blight hauler coughs. Its forward intake heaves out a rope of congealed kindness that lands back on its housing and rolls like a slug. The mortar belches, gags, and ejects a shell that lands at the mortar's own feet and tries to convince the ground that gravity is a choice. The ground refuses. The shell sulks and fizzes. Guardsmen shoot it until it stops having opinions. The banner wilts, then straightens, then remembers it is a flag and waits for its side to tell it what to feel. The hauler backs up in offended dignity. The road of filth it meant to lay dissolves under the wave and becomes puddles of lost arguments. Poxwalkers slip and fall and enjoy it less than they expected to. The fog retreats up sooty brick like a cat choosing a higher shelf. Hold, Holt murmurs. He watches the pressure dials on Tertius's panel shake and then settle, like men after a sermon they did not like but admit was sound. The doctor tightens the cuff on the valve one notch. The tapping in his arm becomes a spike driven in the bone. He keeps his breath even by counting other people's. Almost, he says to the framework, which is not a pet but responds to tone. The hauler makes a decision. It swings a side-mounted sprayer toward the cathedral vents and spews a rope of worms singing a catechism about hunger. The rope meets the outgoing breath. The worms roll like bad laundry and slide away slimy and indignant. Varro lowers her pistol. She realizes she has not fired in this engagement and marvels at the novelty. Satisfied, dissatisfied, the doctor says. That is how we remain alive. Holt allows a small human thing to cross his face. It might be a smile. We bought another hour, he says. Half, the doctor corrects. And they'll spend it on thinking. That is more dangerous than their bombs. Ryan's bead whispers. Governor, he says. Enemy movement on the western spine. Not heavy. Smart. Runners and whisperers. They're looking for weak theory. Barrow's eyes find the mesh aisle of cured again. The men sit like patients. She senses where the next cut will be asked to land. They will not rush us, she says. They will peel. They will show us our own argument and ask us to defend it. The bell in the cathedral tower rings once without a hand on the rope. It is a coincidence that spills salt. It is not a miracle. War Council reconvenes in 20, Holt says. Ryan, reset lines. Tertius, nurse the vents and give me a number if they start to die. Sister, he looks to the hospitaller. Your quiet ones carry stone. No more than they must. Pair each with a living man who says his name into his ear every 10 steps. The hospitaller nods once, as if that rule were a balm. Yes, Governor. Varro waits for the room to empty enough that they can afford honesty. You like him, she says to Holt. Not a question. I like tools that bite the right way, he says. I don't like who has to swing them. She taps the rosette. We are not far from heresy. He taps the map. We are nearer to a grave. They look at the doctor. He's at the mesh, not touching the bars. He is speaking through them to a cured man. His voice is low and conversational, as if arranging a delivery. The cured nods, once, tidy. The doctor steps back and does not watch. He knows the instruction will be obeyed. Tell me now, Varro says quietly, before the next advance and the next argument. What precisely is the thing that costs you when you work the frame? What does it take? He considers lying and does not. I borrowed a denial from a world that had too much, he says. I made a hole in the polite fabric. and I keep it braced open by telling it the story it likes. Each time I tell it, it takes a tax. It will demand more. Eventually, it will demand me, not my throat, something more inconvenient. Your will, Varro says. My stubbornness, he replies. Those are not the same. Could you pay it in others? Holt asks, without guilt. Yes, the doctor says, but I'm not stupid. Is there a moment you cannot pay? Varro presses. Soon, he says. If we keep choosing to live, it will become harder. That is what makes choosing to live interesting. A runner chokes on the threshold and spits out a message with too much speed. Inquisitor, Governor. The enemy speaks to the Habcast. They are telling the city a story. Varro moves as if the floor sloped. Patch it, she says. The chapter house. Vox coughs and then sings in a sweet, wet voice that is not technically unpleasant. Citizens, it coos. Your cough is your prayer. Your fear is your sin leaving. Let go. The good doctor will make you still, and we will make you warm. Do not let them deny you release. The cured in the mesh lift their faces as if sun came indoors. One smiles, small and private, at nothing. Varro's hand is on the gate without choosing to be. The Hospitaller lays her burned glove over Varro's white knuckles. Not yet, she says. Say the law first. Varro breathes out the law. By order of the Holy Ordos, that cast is a sedition. By law of the city, that voice is treason. By right of the living, that comfort is false. Holt switches channels. His voice is steel and bread. People of Halcyon, he says, this is Governor Holt. You have heard a pretty lie. Here is an ugly truth. We will fight this malady until it is tired of our company. We will be bored. We will be stubborn. We will live. If you can lift a stone, lift a stone. If you can carry water, carry water. If you're afraid, be afraid with us. The doctor listens. He nods once. That is how you make a fever break, he says. Annoy it. Varro watches the cured man she spoke to through the mesh. He sits still again. His smile goes away, because it was not his. She looks at the doctor with a variance of respect and disgust that in her is kin to love. Holt turns back to the table. We need to harden against stories, he says. We need a ritual that is ours, not long, not pretty, repeatable. The Hospitaller answers at once. Say your name, say your work, say whom you carry. Then breathe in 4 beats and out 4 beats. Repeat. Anyone who cannot repeat is either dying or lying. Adopted, Varro says. Now we teach it to the city in 10 minutes we do not have. Ryan appears at the door, sweat carving white lines in brick dust on his cheeks. Governor, he says. Scouts report a fenced convoy of prisoners moving under Death Guard banner toward the furnace break. Source households flagged as stubborn. They intend to make an example. Ransom by plague, Holt says. He tastes bile and chews it down. We cut them out. Varro's eyes go flint. And we learn how far the doctor's cure will carry under pressure, she adds. We may need to return people who have seen that banner and still be people after. She looks at the mask. Can you give me back descent? The doctor studies the frame in his hands. He studies his own fingers as if they belong to a man he will have to teach to write again. I can give you back breath, he says. Descent is between you and your emperor. Then we use your breath, Holt says. And we earn our descent. The plan unfolds as quickly as a cheap map. Rhine angles 3 squads into the shadows of the furnace break, moving through the aftertaste of the cathedral's breath. Sisters take the high ferrocrete lip and lay down a soft choir of bolter threat without spending it. The cured go ahead with carts. They are ignored because insult has hierarchy. The convoy comes into view through a curtain of old rain. Prisoners shuffle under hooks strung with wet banners. They cough in unison, but do not want to. Death Guard shepherds prod with pipes that seep comfortable warmth. The warmth smells like clean sheets after funerals. It is seductive in the way of a bed at shift's end. Holt marks the wagon with a knot of children in its middle. He points twice. Ryan nods once. Sisters angle fire and wait for the downbeat. Barrow's voice is in every ear that matters. Aim to unmake the shepherds, not the sheep. The doctor is already moving. He walks alongside the convoy like a man considering whether to board a train. He touches a pipe and it sulks. He touches a chain and it lets go because he asks nicely. He touches a child's temple. The child forgets to be warmed by the banner and remembers to be bored by it. Severin walks at the doctor's shoulder, and his absence turns the convoy's liturgy into a cough. The Death Guard feel it and hate it, because you can't kill boredom with a sword. They swing anyway. Sisters answer and render opinions that stop men from having opinions at all. The doctor climbs onto a wagon and crouches among the prisoners. He speaks to an old man who has decided to live for spite. "Breath with me," he says, and counts fours. The man breathes fours. The woman beside him hears the math and breathes fours. The child sees that 4 is as many as his hands and breathes fours until it feels like winning. The banner's warmth cools. It doesn't like routine. Banners are theatrical. Routine makes banners yawn. Ryan's squads cut the rear of the convoy like meat off a bone. Holt's reserves show teeth where the Death Guard expect gums. The shepherds look up and see Law arriving and decide to teach it a song. They begin to sing. The doctor pinches the seam again. The song coughs. The procession loses choreography. "Now," Varro says, and the high choir commits. Bolter thuds puncture the argument. Guardsmen pull chains, and chains become ropes, and ropes become bridges out of beds you did not choose. Prisoners scramble toward a line of cured who hold carts steady with inhuman patience. Cured take small hands and put them onto rails with a gentle efficiency that would be called love if anyone wanted to complicate it. A plague. Marine shoulders through, armor sloughing joy, and lofts a censer that wants to make the air a bath. Severin steps into it. The bath drains and complains. Varro's sword finds the Marine's elbow and turns it into an answer to an unasked question. Holt shoots 3 shells into the Marine's chest because sometimes theology needs punctuation. The convoy breaks. The example fails. The city watches and learns a worse habit than surrender. They bring the freed through the furnace break under the cathedral's damp breath. The Hospitaller triages with the speed of a saint who never asks what miracles cost. The cured carry some and do not drop them. One cured looks at the child he carried and cocks his head in a gesture that is almost curiosity. It hurts to see because it is almost a person. The doctor watches it hurt and says nothing. When the last prisoner crosses the threshold, Varro closes the gate with her own hands. She holds it shut and breathes fours and lets the habit teach her body to ignore adrenaline. She turns to the doctor. "Good," she says. "Now we pay for it." The cathedral's bells ring on purpose. Tertius turns the vents down to save the pipe's thin patience. Holt's men pick sleep in handfuls and put it in their pockets for later. Ryan counts ammunition and subtracts the number of conversations he will now need to have with boys who saw their fathers made correct by a certain kind of mercy. The chapter house fills again. Praise comes first because even hard men bleed better after salt. Holt says, "Well done," in the tone of a man who says it rarely and never to make himself feel noble. Ryan gives the doctor a nod, as if to say, "You fight ugly the way I like." The Hospitaller touches her rosary and does not mention God because she trusts him and does not want to start a fight. Then the anxieties are placed on the table like knives. Varro points to the mesh aisle. "We kept them from being vessels this time," she says. We will not always. We need a protocol for when a cured repeats a song. Terminate, Holt says, because he will not allow the city to pretend not to be at war with itself. Not immediately, the Hospitaller says, and her voice is steel wrapped in bandage. We test. We try fours. We speak names. We try family. If none anchors, She looks at the doctor. He does not help. I do it. Ryan nods once that he will be the hand if she cannot. Varro turns to the doctor. Your anchor debt, she says. How many such engagements before you begin to make mistakes you do not regret? 3, he says without calculation. 4 if your null keeps me honest. 2 if your cathedral chooses to be fussy. Fussy, Tertius growls, insulted on behalf of a building. Buildings are patience, the doctor says mildly. They have moods. Varro folds it into doctrine. 3, she says. Then we change plan. We do not lean on a tool until it breaks and cuts the man holding it. Holt exhales. What else can hurt him like that singer, he asks, not looking at the hololith, because it will show him something worse if he stares. Anything that redefines the state he claims as cure, Varro says. Anything that makes stillness a weapon, or reduces boredom to complicity. The doctor's hand twitches. They will send a mirror, he says. Something with a beak and a joke. Later, Varro says. We have enough insult for 1 hour. The Vox loudspeakers along the spire crackle. A new voice intrudes. It is dry, clipped, bureaucratic, and was once kind before work made it neat. By edict of the Astra Telepathica, all unsanctioned metapraxes are to report to Sanction Point 9 for oathbind and inventory. Failure constitutes evasion of tithe. Non-compliance will be met with censure. Holt swears softly. Varro's eyes become very still. That would be the choir from the tower waking up, she says. Do we answer that? Ryan asks. We must, Varro says, or they will arrive and replace our crisis with theirs. She faces the doctor. You will submit to a binding. No, he says, as if declining a wine he dislikes. She doesn't blink. Then I will make one that looks like obedience and is not. He inclines his head, amused and not ungrateful. Good. They climb the tower. The smell changes. Less plague, more old paper, less vinegar, more ink dried 40 winters ago. At the oculus, a cadre of adepts with the hollow eyes of men who carry law climbs into their hands like a fever they manage. Their chief, a man with fingers stained subdermally by ink, holds a data slate like a blade. You have a creature, he says to Varro, meaning the doctor, deploying illegal apparatus. I have a physician, Varro says, deploying the only apparatus that has purchased us this conversation. Sanction, the adept says. Now, Varro shows the rosette. Later, the adept's eyes flick to the doctor's beaked mask. He shudders once, honest, then schools himself. If it corrupts the weave, the city dies slowly and sweet, he says. If we stop it, we may die fast and correct. Both are deaths, Holt says. I prefer the one with work in it. The adept swallows something sour. Fine, oath now, paper later. He recites a binding draft. Varro edits on the fly. Where it says unfettered, she swaps evoked under inquisitorial eye. Where it says yield, she writes declare. Where it says person, she writes instrument. She hands it to the doctor. He reads without touching. I will not say those names, he says, picking 3 words off the page as if they smell. They are bottles. Varro crosses them out with a nail. Then your oath is to silence at those points, she says, and to obey a raised hand in this shape. She raises 2 fingers, the sign she gave him once in the avenue when he had to stop or die. He considers, then nods. I will pretend you control me, he says. The adept makes the sign of a man who wants to wash his hands and is too tired to find water. Fine, he says. You are on our book. You will be in trouble if you live through the day. He signs and stamps again, because stamping feels like control and he needs the feeling. The tower trembles. The city shifts its weight. News comes up the stair like cold. Ryan takes it without letting it run wild in his throat. Enemy probing lines with whisperers. Citizens near the break are humming. We catch it early. We cut it. We don't. It blooms. Varro points. We go ourselves. Holt stares at the horizon and sees the next hour leaning toward them with a grin. We go. On the way down, the doctor lags one step, then matches pace. The tapping in his arm has found a new beat. It tries to teach his feet to walk differently. He ignores it the way a man ignores a former lover at market. He does not look directly. Outside, the city is a lesson. White sheets hang from windows like surrendered flags and dry in a wind that has learned not to carry certain notes. The cured push carts. Children ride on bags and do not cough for 6 counts, then cough once and feel victory. Someone laughs on purpose. Someone cries because laughter is contagious. In the alley they must pass, a woman stands with a knife. She is thin in the neck and had a baby once. Her eyes are bright with sleep loss and faith. She holds the knife toward the doctor. You took my husband, she says. You gave me a quiet man. Give him back. The doctor stops. He does not step back. He has no fear of knives because knives are honest. He tilts his head. What did he say when you asked him to return? He looked, she says, tears burning. He looked like he was waiting for a sign. Did he hit you? The doctor asks. No. Did he starve? No. Did he leave? No. Then he is with you, the doctor says. I did not take him. The pestilence took what argued in him. I cut out the argument. You will teach him new ones. She shakes with anger because being given work is worse than being given a villain. He is not the man. He is alive, the doctor says softly. You will decide if that is worse. Varro steps between them and angles her body to hide the decision she is ready to make if the woman lunges. Holt allows the moment to teach his men something about citizen management. Ryan watches the knife. The Hospitaller watches the woman's breath and counts 4s with her without being seen. The woman's hand drops. She steps aside. She hates it. She will hate it for years. It will keep her alive in a way a lover does. They move on. At the break, whisperers coil through crowds like smoke. They do not speak with mouths. They speak with posture, with relaxation, with the invitation to sit down against a wall and put your head back. Varro recognizes the rhetoric. She learned it on worlds where giving up looked virtuous. The doctor moves among them like an insult. He smells like work. The whisperers hate work. He touches temples and steals sighs. He writes small chalk marks on door lintels and moves the wind through alleys with vinegar and geometry. Severin stands in the street like a nail. The song goes the long way around him. They tamp the flare before it flowers. They do it without heroics. They do it by being boring and disciplined and not letting anyone write them an ending. At the hour's edge, the bells ring once more. Not plague bells, cathedral bells. A plain note, a duty note. Holt leans into the chapter house table and rests his knuckles on the map. We have made a day into 3, he says. We are now in the business of making 3 into 4. Ryan rolls a shoulder. Heavy will come back. They will be angry and humiliating. They will force choices. Then we choose better sins, Varro says. The doctor looks toward the smoke where the Hulk still sulks. He hears a laugh in the hole he keeps open, the old device purring against his ribs like a cat that will one day ask to eat him in return for all the mice he's asked it to catch. He closes his hand until the glove creaks. They will send my mirror, he says again. He will offer me a purer cure. Let him, Varro says. We will refuse him together, and it will hurt. The Hospitaller sits just for a moment on the step by the mesh. She counts fours and lets her hand ache. A cured man turns his head and looks at her. The look is almost a question. Not yet, she tells him. And he looks away, and she breathes. The city pivots like a patient on a bed. The next hour arrives carrying a tray. It is full of vials with labels you can't read until you open them. They open one and drink, and it is bitter but survivable. They leave the sweetest for their enemies. And above the manufactoria, in a little hush that was not there when the day began, a flock of flies makes a shape like a beak and dissolves before anyone can point. The hour ends like a stitch pulled tight. The next begins with the same hands. They gather where maps learn to breathe. Holt's finger tracks the manufactoria ring and names the places that matter with the casual cruelty of command. Ryan lays out his sappers like organs around a heart. Varro lets strangers speak first, so she can choose which enemy she needs to be. Their goals? Holt asks. Ryan taps the furnace icons. Consecrate heat. Make every vent an altar. Break our cathedral or make it sing out of tune. Pull the citizens into docility by proving we can't protect our own stubbornness. Secondary, Varro adds. Us, Ryan says, nodding at the doctor. They'll try to bottle the crow. The doctor stands apart, listening to the building. They'll replace mass with definition, he says. Less fog. More hymns that teach your lungs new morals. Magos Tertius rattles in agreement. Their servo psalms are infecting the ductwork. My machines are reciting words in their sleep. Standard counters, Holt asks. Fail, Varro says. Fire scares fog. It does not debate scripture. Their tallymen are counting our breath. The servo skull inks a brief map in the air. Red blisters mark idols rammed into the city's circulation. Rusted bells welded to vents. Totems of bone wired to fan cages. Icons wrapped in flayed blueprints. Each hums a different key. Each teaches heir to be someone else's parishioner. Targets, Holt says. Pick one that matters. Tertius points with a mechadendrite. Septic spindle. Ventilation spire G19. It turns 2/3 of the east habs. If we cleanse it, pressure will favor us for 6 zones. If we fail, they own the ring. Varro nods once, sharp as a cut. We gather our argument there. Ryan gives them the route and the risk. They've seeded entropy idols around it. Gravity argues nonsense. Bullets slow. Orders sound like lullabies. Expect a champion. They'll send someone who makes us regret hope. The doctor taps his glove against his wrist to a pulse he doesn't choose. Good, he says quietly. When the surgeon is gone, the landlord arrives. They go under the city's tongue, through maintenance corridors that taste like old motor smoke and secrets. Sisters of battle move in pairs, prayers clip to their breath's metronome. Guards hold shields at just the angle where a ricochet becomes faith. The cured push carts with ordered patience. Severin walks as if the floor decides to be floor where he steps. Septic spindle rises like a petrified airway. Pipes coil it in iron vines. Bells hang along its ribs, made from stolen dinnerware and communion offerings, each with a hairline crack tuned to a theft. Fog curls around the base, polite as a clerk at the front desk. Idols, Tertius says, pointing. Rusted little shapes whispering. They look like children's toys left in a gutter and taught to lie. Don't touch, Varro orders. We shoot, we break, we learn if they complain. Ryan marks fire arcs. 2 teams cut the toy line. 1 team with the doctor to the spindle heart. Severin in the middle. The first volley tears open the perimeter's lies. The idols spit sparks and stink like wet pennies. Fog peels back to find its courage. Out past the cleared ring, shapes shift like promises. He arrives as the first idol dies. A figure in Baroque plate steps from behind a pipe, as if the pipe apologized. His armor is the color of scabbed mint and the texture of old cake. A crown of exhaust fans behind his head. A splay of bells sways from his waist. In his hands he carries a scythe that is not a tool, but an idea that learned to cut. His visor is a grin punched into a gas mask and decorated with brass tears. Lord of Contagion, Ryan breathes. The skull feeds the Vox the designation with a small, dry cough. Titles on file: Mortuary Satrap, Ward Breaker, Verilok of the Third Cohort. The Lord's Vox amplifies his joy. Little chirurgeon, he calls, come sharpen your cure upon my affliction. The city holds its breath for the duel without being told. The doctor steps forward. He does not bow because ceremony is how disease gets into churches. You are unwell, he says. I am well enough to be your teacher, Verilok purrs. He gestures with the scythe. The blade's edge is etched in a script that never learned to end a word. Let us compare dictionaries. Barrow glances at Holt. Holt nods once. Open corridor, he orders. Bolters on who interrupts. No stray heroics. Severin moves to the doctor's left. A straight line of absence. Varro to the right. Sword loose. Stance low. Ryan calibrates a perimeter fire policy like a surgeon establishing a sterile field. The doctor takes the frame out like a man seeks a pen in an argument he intends to win without raising his voice. He sets a rod at the base of the spindle. He cracks a vial on the scythe blade's reflection. It smokes, smiles, then sulks. Verilok advances, bells laughing. He swings. The scythe cleaves a line through air. The line does not close. Sound spills out and forgets to be sound. Color distorts as if embarrassed. The world bleeds in a way that cannot be mopped. The blade kisses the doctor's forearm, where he raises it as if to block an accusation. The kiss is gentle and absolute. The glove chars. The leather sticks. Something walks up his veins humming. He does not cry out. He catalogues. The sensation is not rot. It is misdefinition. Where the scythe touched, cure loses its period. It becomes a comma that invites something to add. For our purpose, if he touches with that hand now, he will quiet a body in a way that makes it the right temperature for other people's hymns. He clamps the tourniquet from his satchel above the cut and hears it make a tiny, formal argument with his blood. He speaks to his arm like a colleague who missed a meeting. No, we refuse. Severin presses closer. The enemy song flattens. The scythe's hum jags. Verilok's bells go petulant. Null, Verilok croons. A hole in the ward. Charming. Varro's blade reads the scythe's timing and slides into the space right after the swing, the way you push into conversation after a cough. She cuts for the elbow. The armor gives like a grudge. Tempered filth sprays. The smell is hot spoon and old broth. Verilok laughs in honest delight. I will keep that one, he says, as if choosing a student. He pivots and lets the scythe's back blade sing. Varro steps away by instinct she calls providence. The edge takes a lock of her hair and a piece of the air. The missing air whistles and complains until Severin stands in it and bores it back into nothing. The doctor uses the complaint as a key. He angles the frame and hums the dirty white tone. The idols along the spindle's ribs shiver and stop whispering for a heartbeat. He takes it. He pours mercury across the base where the air likes to recite. The silver runs and makes grammar wrong for plague. Verilok stomps, delighted. The ground bruises. A net of rust leaps up from the cobbles, iron filings woven by bad memory. It wraps the device's legs and the doctor's ankles and tightens with affectionate authority. Hold, Verilok hisses. Let me cut you into something useful. The net bites. It is not metal. It is all the times a surgeon was praised for speed when he needed to be praised for listening. The doctor feels it teach his frame to be obedient. He pulls once, twice. The frame hums complaint. The tapping in his arm becomes a knocking that remembers the last door it forced. "Severin," he says. The blank steps onto the net. It rusts into disappointment. It falls apart like the plan written by committee. The device finds its feet again and thrums low like a warning drum. Verilok swings for Severin's head. The scythe meets absence and skids. It screams in a register that makes skin go to gooseflesh. Severin does not blink. Varro's sword carves into the Lord's calf in reply. A clean surgical line not meant to persuade, merely to inform. Rhine's squads dart in to cut down the Blight Guard support, each engagement a punctuation mark. Sisters chant a clipped litany and put down anything that tries to join the private lesson uninvited. Verilok's scythe comes around low, and then up like a joke you're not ready to laugh at. The tip catches the beak of the mask and tears away a slice of leather and an inch of wood under it. The doctor's cheek shows, a sallow thing carved in patience. The scythe licks it. A filament of definition crawls up his jaw. The doctor tastes sweetness curdled into iron. He has always hated sugar in medicine. He knows the wound channel now. It is a line drawn from his palm to his tongue. If he names a cure with his mouth before he rebuilds the protocol, it will operate under borrowed grammar. He shuts his teeth on words. Temptation arrives in a warm draft. It is not Verilok's voice. It is a rounder one, paternal, padded. It comes up from the wound like steam from a bath. It smells like bread. It sounds like your grandfather forgiving you for breaking a bowl and then asking you to break more because it's fun to sweep. You love them, it says. They are so tired. You can end their fear. Let me correct your nouns. Make still mean safe. Make quiet mean home. You will be adored. No one will scream under your hand again. Think how clean the wards will be. Think of your girls and boys folding hands without trembling. He sees for one instant a city cured into a choir. No riots, no panic, no complaints, no will. Work continues. Machines hum, priests weep, grateful, because martyrdom is boring when hunger has no edges. The war ends because someone put the world down for a nap and never called it to supper. He can make that world. The hole he holds open in himself purrs like a cat that has finally been allowed into a lap. The frame in his hand warms with lust that calls itself elegance. He declines. He declines not with a speech but with a little act. He pinches the scythe's hummed edge with 2 fingers through glove and tourniquet and tells it no in the same tone he used to hush a leaking pipe and a bragging pump. It is the tone a tired nurse uses when the drunk comes into the ward with flowers and noise. The scythe jerks. For an instant the hum slips and becomes language. The words are, "You are unbearable." He smiles without showing teeth. The price is a pulse. He triggers the frame at a setting he promised he wouldn't. The micro anchor takes a big bite of the local Imperium and leaves a hole the size of a heart. Everything for 10 meters becomes very, very simple. For 1 second, all truth shows itself without notes. 3 poxwalkers die back into meat. 2 guardsmen clutch at their chests because hearts hate being dragged through this much silence. A sister drops to her knee and vomits clean bile that smells like soap. Varro's ears bleed, and she does not notice because she only cares about seeing in this second. Severin staggers. Not a step, but his breath misses a beat, and that is obscenely intimate. The device eats the scythe's tune. The wound in the doctor's arm stops widening. It does not close. It sulks. Verilok snarls, bells jangling into anger. "You are a thief," he spits, almost hurt. "You steal the music." "I perform subtraction," the doctor says. He wants to say cure, and cannot yet. Verilok charges. The scythe comes down in a sheet of unpleasant weather. Varro's blade meets it and skates along it, finds the haft, bites, and holds. Severin shoves the idea of sorcery away from the doctor like a man shouldering a drunk out a door. Ryan's squads put 16 rounds into joints that believed themselves sacred. Tertius remote dials a vent so that steam slaps the Lord's visor and fogs his grievance for half an instant. The doctor uses the half. He steps into the Lord's space, close enough to smell the specific rot under the general one. He touches 2 fingers to Verilok's throat, where the flesh under the armor thinks it is safe because it is mostly story. He introduces the throat to a clause it does not like. Swallow, he commands, and Verilok does. He chokes on his own song. The bells falter. The scythe's edge stutters. Varro pulls and the blade skews wide, cutting only an argument instead of a man. Now, Holt says, and the world he commands answers. Mines pop under Verilok's heel. A shard of honest steel jumps into the Lord's eye. It thinks about becoming a relic and decides to become work instead. Verilok staggers and then stands straighter, impressed. He bows without irony. Good theatre, he says warmly. We will write you into our legend. Then he leaves. He does not run. He does not blink. He simply steps back into a fold of air that has learned to be considerate to his kind. He is not insulted. He is invigorated. He wants the revision. Guardsmen do not waste shells at ghosts. Sisters chant the 2 words they always chant when victory is confusing. Hold, hold. The spindle's idols shiver and wilt. The bells stop one by one with old man sighs. Steam runs the pipes hot for a minute and then settles into the work of being slightly cleaner than it was. The doctor leans his shoulder against the spindle and lets the frame hang from one strap like a tired instrument. He does not shake. The tourniquet darkens under his glove and leaks a thread of sweet smell into the appalled air. Varro stands very close without touching. She looks at the black filigree creeping under his skin like polite ivy. Explain the wound channel, she says. Orders keep her from crying, and she is always grateful to them when they do. It wants to borrow my definitions, he says. He is precise, but not precious. If I name a cure while it is in me, I will inadvertently agree to their thesis. My patients will be still and warm and loved into readiness. Can you cut it out? Holt asks. Because men like him prefer questions that have hands. Yes, the doctor says. Not today. Why not? Today the hole I keep open is gorged and angry, he says. If I ask it to cut me as well as them, it will ask me to marry it. Say no, Varro says, as if to a recruit being invited to a tavern that has never once been a tavern and will always be a trap. I did, he replies. It understood. It will ask with flowers later. Codex. Note. The Man Reaper's edge carries a semantic infection vector, an antiphon that reassigns the doctor's quietuses to quiescence for ripening. Null presence blunts the transduction, but also attenuates the microanchor's harmonics, requiring overdraw. Overdraw causes local ontological hush. Excessive application risks cardiopulmonary arrest in baseline humans. They hold the spindle long enough to claim that word. Rhine plants charges where Tertius tells him the metal will accept a liturgical correction. Sisters burn the idols and stamp their ash into a crosshatch on the stones. The cured carry the bodies out without making the mistake of being gentle. Back at the cathedral, debate chooses its words. We won, Holt says, because numbers agree, and numbers do not lie unless asked to. We forbade them a totem, at cost, Varro corrects. She gestures at the tourniquet. She does not gesture at the 3 guardsmen, who almost died of honesty when the hush went out. She does not need to. The Hospitaller sees them and has already written their names on 2 lists. They will send worse than a champion, Ryan adds. They'll send a principal. They will send me, a new voice says from a Vox sensor in the nave, soft and round and endless. It is the same paternal comfort as the earlier draft but heavier, like bread with raisins you didn't ask for. The candles lean toward it. Grandfather, a priest whispers, and the Hospitaller slaps his mouth gently, because sometimes a hand must keep a soul from falling out. The voice is not an apparition. It is attention. It looks through everything with affection you cannot refuse without being rude. Little chirurgeon, it says, delighted. Your gloves are wrong. Your breath is wrong. Your love is right. Why refuse me the correction? Come, child. Put down your sharp words. Let me show you a ward where no one cries except to laugh. The doctor can smell a wet garden through stone. He has not smelled a garden since a long summer that ended the month. Thieves took his books and left the shelves. He stares at the frame, and the frame purrs into his hand in a pleasure that is almost sorrow. I do not treat gods, he says aloud, polite. The waiting room is for the mortal. You can bleed elsewhere. Laughter shakes the air, not cruel, proud. The laugh of an old man whose grandson said something sharp at dinner and made the aunties tisk. The attention moves on, amused. The candles settle. The room remembers being itself. Varro lets her breath out in 4s by the Hospitaler's rule. And names. Thalia Varro, Inquisitor. I carry Halcyon. Work, refuse infection. Saying it aloud is a charm she trusts more than the rosette sometimes. Holt clears his throat. We go to the next, he begins, but the bells in the tower ring a clipped pattern that is its own law. It is not Ryan's code. It is not Varro's. It is an older code that makes men in scarlet choose to stand up. Boots enter the nave in a sound like money behaving. Gold is not a color in war. It is a tone, a weight. Here, gold arrives like an accusation. 3 figures cross the threshold with gravity that does not trip. At their head, a man who is also a weapon. Armor like poured light. A face like a statue that remembers what flesh was for. His spear is a line that could have been a prayer and became an edge. At his flank, women in dull grey plate with smooth faces, eyes like dry wells. They carry blades, and their silence is a room that ignores music. When they step, Varro's teeth ache. When they turn their heads, the frame's hum goes confidential. Custodes, sisters of silence. Holt doesn't bow because he has given up bowing for food and ammunition. He does not raise his voice because it would be small. He simply stands square. Ryan stands a half step behind and to the left like a proper shadow. Varro inclines her head. She does not kneel, because she has chosen which knees to save for which altars. My Lord Custodian, she says, and offers respect cleanly without pretending affection. The custodian's voice is the art of restraint. By order of those you serve, we are to witness and mitigate. His gaze travels to the doctor. It catalogues him with the calm of a gardener choosing which trees to cut for light. The aberrant metapraxian, one of the Nurgle says, not cruelly. You made a hole and kept it. I did, the doctor says. It keeps you company quite nicely. The blank blinks without blinking. The air around the doctor and Severin becomes thin without getting colder. The wound on his arm stops humming as hard for a second and then thinks better of it. The custodian inclines his head a millimeter. He has recognized that humor is being attempted and refuses to be enlisted. Orders, he says to Varro without looking away from the mask. You will bring your instrument to judgment. You will present the facts. You will accept a mandate or a denial. Where? Varro asks. Because place matters in such things. Do I bring this instrument? Throneward, the custodian says. He does not say terror. He does not need to. A black ship waits. Your hourglass is visible even from orbit. Holt's jaw works. "We are in siege," he says mildly, which always means not mildly. "We move our surgeon, and we bleed." "You bleed if you do not," the custodian replies. "You have taught the enemy a name. The enemy has taught you a promise. Both must be audited." The Hospitaller stands, sets her burned hand at her side, and finds composure by naming herself. "Sister Verony," she says inwardly. "Work, carry." Outward, she says, "He is saving lives. He is also building a ledger," the custodian says. "If he is sanctioned, he may keep it. If not, he must be unbilled before his debt bankrupts your city." Varro looks at Holt because men like him must be honored by being asked. His eyes have already done the math. "We buy a day," he says. "We can buy you the road to orbit and not spend too many of our sons. After that, we pretend this was always the plan." Ryan rubs two fingers together to get grime off and finds it is not dirt. It is war itself. He gives a short nod. "I'll make the corridor." Severin glances at the gnolls. For the first time since he gave her his name, there is something like emotion at the corner of his mouth. It is kinship and dread. Varro faces the doctor. "You have won us 3, she says. "You made the city a little bored and saved its life. Now you come and answer for your phrases." "And if I do not?" the doctor asks. "Not to be contrary. To hear what bones make when they're taught to say truth. Then I will put you down like a bad dog in a school," Varro says, soft as the edge on a cassock needle. "I will do it quick and private and hate you for making me choose the smaller evil. And then I will confess the sin of not regretting it enough." He looks at her as if she has diagnosed herself perfectly. He nods. "Very well. I will bring my whole to your house, and you can see if its manners can be taught." The custodian steps closer. Each plate of his armor was fabricated by someone who worshipped precisely. Up close, the mask sees his skin. It is old without being weak. He smells like oil that never spoiled. "You will submit to the sister's silence," he says to the doctor. "You will keep your hand off your device unless told. If you break law in the spirit of zeal, I cut your arms at the elbow, and we present you as a mouth only." "Efficient," the doctor says. He inclines his head. "I prefer hands." A gnoll steps forward. She does not speak. Her presence speaks. The wound in the doctor's arm quiets to a polite line. The frame hums through a handkerchief. The whole purrs like a cat put into a room with an older cat and told to behave. "We move," Holt says, because he cannot allow the conversation to pretend he ceased to exist. "Ryan, East Run. Cathedral breath impulses. Tertius, give me a metered wind. Sisters, sing like you don't mean it. Deceive ears. Cured hall, no contact. If whisperers show, shoot, and then shoot the air they used." Varro adds, "Priesthood stays in the gate and does not invent new rituals until I return. Hospitaller, your authority extends to the morale of half this city. If anyone tells them to lie down and die poetic, you lay that man down first." The Hospitaller bows her head at duties she already assumed. "Yes." On the way out, a man stops the doctor with the desperate politeness of the newly bold. "My wife," he says, holding the air like a fragile cup. "You made her quiet. She is alive. She does not speak. If you go, who?" The argument persists, the doctor says. And then, because he has learned to serve these people without making them think they ordered him, adds, "Teach her 4. Teach her names. Teach her to hold a rope and not let go. Tell her she is rude to die while so many worse men live. She will obey that insult." The man nods the 3 fast nods that are almost a prayer. He looks at Varro with hate and gratitude mixed like bad medicine. She accepts both. They are evidence that oxygen reached the brain. They move through a city that has learned to put its furniture against the doors. Steam breathes out of vents and tastes like patience. cured hall stones and sandbags and men missing pieces. Guards set tripwires and cradle mine triggers like cats. Sisters take corner pews and claim streets with the shadows of their helms. The custodies walk as if roads choose to be roads to avoid the embarrassment of not being prepared. Aegese Arch. At the eastern edge, the fourth gate is a mouth with molars. Outside, the road to the spaceport is a line of broken teeth. The Death Guard sit on 3 of the teeth and smile like dentists. Ryan signs with a finger and a knife. 3 squads move like commas through collapsed habs. Holt watches and sees not heroics, but competence. It tastes better. Fog creeps the way a good excuse does, quickly, without seeming to hurry. Whisperers walk in it like arguments men would rather believe than take orders. The frame in the doctor's hand warms. The wound in his arm tries to hum. Severin's presence makes both ashamed. The first border test is a handful of poxwalkers and 2 Marines pushing a pallet of ugly icons. Shoot the icons, Varro orders, and anyone who looks relieved when they break. They do, and a man in a ragged priest collar exhales like a believer seeing a miracle, and then realizes he should not have exhaled. Ryan puts a bullet into his collar and prays in the ugly way that works. The second test is a blightspawn who steps out from a cable tangle with a hose smelling of hot sugar. The doctor snaps no at it. The nozzle twitches away like a disobedient dog and drowns its master in affection. The blightspawn dies happy. The doctor tries not to resent him for this. He fails. The third test is the obvious one. A barge's shadow passes over the road. The Hulk wept over the city earlier. Now it comes lower, as if to apologize by making the apology a flattening. Ducked whales, Ryan curses. No cover. Tertius murmurs to the vents like a man cooing to a cranky goddess. The cathedral coughs. A pulse of clean breath kisses the road. It is not a wall. It is a scoff. The Hulk descends into it, and the scoff complicates its approach with the kind of seeming accident that kills pilots. It shaves a spire and then sits back in its seat like a driver told to wait his turn. Holt's men run under the petulance. Sisters ignore gravity out of spite and follow. Halfway to the port, the road narrows to an old cut through rock, where 1,000 years of carts have left a sermon in the stone. The Death Guard have made it a gallery of obscene banners and lanterns, a laughing hospital corridor. At the far end stands Virilok again, bells quieter, scythe rested, visor put back on, as if specifically to show it cannot be broken in a way that will matter. Round 2, he says cheerful. Bring the null. Bring your little hush. I brought friends. His friends are not men. They are illnesses cut off their chains, things in jars, flies full of psalms. A man-sized vat on tracks with windows full of amber that shows shapes pressing faces to the glass. A woman with the lower half of a furnace who coughs sparks and smiles like a midwife. Ryan's jaw sets. We can brute, he says. No, Varro says, because time now is counted in citizens who will be incursions if they die wrong. We take the cut without waking the gallery. How? Holt says. Curiosity, not sarcasm. Boredom, the doctor says. We make the corridor a waiting room. Severin steps forward. The Null Maidens flank him. Their presence flows down the cut like cold tea. The lanterns dim. The banners wilt. The jars stop writing on the inside of their glass. The woman with the furnace leg sits down, because the floor is suddenly the most interesting thing around here. Virilok sighs in theatrical disappointment. You are a terrible audience, he complains, and flicks the scythe twice, 2 long strokes that cut absence. Severin feels it like a draft through a bone. He does not move. The Nulls put up their palms like prayer and make the cut into a chapel no god wants to attend. Varro looks at the doctor. The black filigree in his arm is up to the elbow now. Can you walk that far without naming your cure? She asks. Yes, he says, and means it and hates it. They walk through. Rhine's squads move cart to cart, soldier to soldier, making sure feet do not scuff. Breaths do not get excited. Holt walks. The Custodes walks. His walking convinces the road to not be dramatic. Verilog bows them past like a host whose party is being ruined by the wrong kind of polite guests. Do come again, he murmurs. You will be more fun after your catechism. They reach the spaceport. It is a scar with a landing pad at one end and a promise of vacuum at the other. A black ship rests like a judgment among warehouses. Its hull is black because paint is cheap and because black hides stress lines. The Sisters of Silence at its foot do not look up. They never do. They do not need to. The custodian turns to Holt. You have done work, he says, and because it is a compliment a custodian is allowed to give, it is enormous. We have not finished, Holt says, which is a lie that knows what it is doing. Bring back my surgeon if he survives your audit. Varro places her palm, ungloved, on Holt's arm. It is a gift of touch she gives sparingly. Hold, she says. If the city wants to live, it will be boring and stubborn and rude to death. Teach it to be rude. He nods. He looks at the doctor. He does not say thank you, because that is not the relationship. He says, return, or die in a way that makes the enemy uncomfortable. The doctor inclines his head. He looks at the Hospitaller. Sister Varen. She knows the question. I will hold names and breath, she says. I will shoot anyone who tries to make sleep a sacrament. He nods, satisfied. He looks at Severin. They do not shake hands because hands are compromised. They do not salute because symbols make holes. Severin simply says, 2 paces, the way a man tells a friend where to meet by the river. They turn toward the gangway. The voidwood hums. The nulls nod once and the ward decides to be obedient. Verilog's voice slides over the tarmac like oil. Chirurgeon, he calls. If you believe the throne will bless your cut, you learn nothing in my lecture. The doctor turns his head a fractional degree. If you believe I operate for blessing, you learn nothing on my table, he replies. He walks. The wound in his arm throbs like a heart taught to watch. The hole he keeps open purrs because it likes ships. Ships are clean cuts through bad air. The black ship takes them. The world shrinks to corridors that smell like old steel and Sister's silence. The hull learns them and files them. Varro is calm the way a bomb is calm when correctly wired. The custodian walks the way a mountain moves with a glacier. In a Medici bay stripped of personality, the sisters test the wound with tools that do not like the wound. They do not use words. They nod to one another, as if agreeing that a child must be moved to a quieter desk. One draws a line of ink on the doctor's forearm, where the filigree stops. The ink does not run. She draws another below. She is writing a schedule for a train. Varro watches the ink and the steadiness of the sister's hand. He will be judged, she says without asking. The custodian does not look at her. He looks at the mask, which looks back because it grew eyes from watching cities. He will be judged by the only thing above all of us big enough to justify this trouble, he says. The Emperor, Varro says. The throne, the custodian corrects. It is the sort of correction that says nothing and everything at once. They burn for orbit. The city curls back below, not grateful because cities cannot be. Only people can be grateful, and they often forget. Holt stands on the eastern wall and counts 4s. Sister Varen stands at the gate and looks at the cured without fear. Rhine checks minds and smiles when they are where he told them to be. Tertius, loud praise to the ducks. Verilog wanders the avenue with the patient interest of a craftsman learning a rival's tool. Above, the black ship slides into the deep, where light is ancient by the time it arrives. Astropaths in their cages sing to distances like men whisper secrets to their own chests. The nulls strip language from the Medici Bay until even heart monitors seem embarrassed to beep. The doctor sits on a steel stool and lets his sister wrap his arm in a bandage that is mostly a philosophy. Severin sits as if he is a coat on a chair. Varro stands because she will not sit on a ship she does not own. The temptation returns a final time before the jump. It is not theatrical. There are no gardens, no bread. It is a small voice that asks him to think of efficiency, to think of all the crying he has heard, to think of how good it would feel to be thanked without qualification. It offers him a title, not master, not God, something worse, beloved. He smiles into the mask. It is visible now through the cut in the beak. Just a curve. Not cruel, not saintly. Tired and accurate. I am sufficient, he says to the empty air, which hates being called empty. And then the ship howls and becomes a line. Silence grabs them by the napes like good dogs. The warp opens like a book read by a man who doesn't move his lips. The hole in the doctor purrs and then coughs because the sister's presence is a chalkboard. The wound's filigree hums, the ink lines hold. Varro stands with 2 fingers raised. It is the shape she negotiated for him to obey. He watches her hand consciously once and then looks away because habit should not be built easily. They cross. The journey is short because black ships choose their routes like knives. When the howl falls off the hull, a world rises. Not terror, not yet. A bastion at the heel of the throne. A fortress planet built to break supplicants before they foul the last stair. Cathedral spires like organ pipes. Rings of batteries like thorns. Sky golden where it likes itself. The black ship kisses a dais. The gangway lowers. The air is full of incense that does not apologize. They come out into pageantry, gold and red and grey, banners the size of factories, statues larger than contrition, a line of sisters like a word composed entirely of consonants, a choir of boys whose voices have not yet broken because they are not allowed to. The custodian speaks in a tone with no room for argument. Reach the throne, he says. Make your case. Varro's jaw sets. We will. The doctor inclines his head to a statue that is bigger than regret. We will discuss bedside manners, he tells it. And the statue does not answer, because statues know when to keep their counsel. They walk into judgment. And behind them, in the city that refuses to die with manners, Holt leans over a map and makes a new hour out of old pieces. Virilok pauses by the cracked wheel where the palanquin fell and runs one armored finger along a groove in the stone. He smiles behind his mask, delighted again, because nothing is more fun than a worthy edit. Halcyon breathes. It hates it. It lives. The hull is a chapel that hums to itself, so men don't. Sisters move like grey notes along the aisle of beds. The Medici lamps are kind on purpose. A null rests a hand on the doctor's forearm, and the black filigree under his skin pauses, then continues politely, as if it were invited to. Varro argues in the nave because she is holy when she does. Cost, she says to the custodian, voice low. We can't pretend there isn't one. Dogma, he replies without heat. We must pretend there is. He pays, she says, nodding at the bandaged arm. We pay. The city pays. But every doctrine here wants to be paid in the end. Then we weigh coins, the custodian says. Not hymns. Severin sits where silence flows best. He watches the doctor's breath. 4 in, 4 out. He counts with him without moving his lips. The frame by the doctor's hip purrs like a complacent cat that knows the house rules and will test them anyway. A sister of silence unrolls a clean cloth. She inks a new line where the crawling definition stops. The ink dries with relief. She draws the twin gesture that Varro taught, 2 fingers raised. She holds it in front of the doctor's mask. His breath stutters. He nods once and the stutter goes quiet. "I will obey when you say enough," he says. "It is not supplication," Varro answers. "It is a break." "Cars without brakes are accidents," the custodian murmurs. The ship moves into the place where maps shrug. The warp is a book that refuses to stay closed. Thrum becomes pressure. Steel remembers it is mortal. The sisters' silence layers the corridors like quilts laid by grandmothers who hated drafts. Midway, the air smiles. It is small. It is courteous. It sits in the corner like a visiting physician who brought fruit and didn't ask where to put it. It wears a beaked mask of white bone. It wears a gown as clean as a prayer and just as smug. Its hands are gloved in quiet. "Brother," it says, in a voice the ship should not love as much as it does. "Your ledger is untidy." Varro's sword is already in her hand. The custodian's spear lowers to a line. The sisters do not move. Their movement is the room forgetting to be generous. The doctor tilts his head. The beak stares into a beak. "You are not my kin," he says. "I am your completion," the thing replies, delighted. "You have been performing palliation. I perform absolution. I will take your debt. Give me your nouns. I will file them." Severin stands, absence widening like a yawn. The visitor breathes it in and shivers with pleasure. Ah, the Null, a diet. It moves differently than the Cantor and the Lord. No spore breath, no bell. It takes nothing. It proposes. The walls warm with approval. The sister's silence sours it, and the hull sighs with the relief of a conscience salvaged. "Designation?" the custodian asks, without turning his head. Varro answers on the bead, because to name is to climb. Warp intruder, reading like a physician construct. Heuristic, palinode, titles on bone. Unmaker of prognosis, archivist of quiet. "Mirror," Severin says. It is the most he has said this voyage. The palinode spreads its hands, delighted once more at being understood. "Let us help those poor tired men on your world," it murmurs. "You can make their stillness empty. I can make it delicious. They will thank you with a relish you have never tasted." A sister steps forward and does nothing. Her presence makes words end in hard consonants. The palinode's gown creases. Its mask tilts as if embarrassed at being seen without powder. "Your cure removes fear," it says to the doctor. "My cure removes want. They combine beautifully. Give me your anchor. I will tune it so you need not hurt when you hush." The doctor feels the hole in him purr, curious. He feels his bandage itch and tells it not to scratch. He could end the tapping. He could end the choice. He pictures a city of quiet men given a new word for joy that needs no will, and he tastes copper. "No," he says. He does not explain. The palinode nods kindly, as if a patient refused a sedation. "Then let me show you your inefficiency." It reaches with a gloved hand and touches the world. For one resented breath, steam in the galley later is done with guilt. Stains leave steel. The stale bread tastes fresh. The groan in a deck beam that has made men love a ship becomes a flat plank of comfort. The frame hums the color of surrender. The filigree in the doctor's arm speeds, delighted to be wanted. The sister's silence drops like a curtain. It tears the trick in half. Comfort becomes maintenance again. Stale bread resents men like it should. The deck beam's groan remembers that love costs. "Pretty," Varro says softly. "Hideous." The custodian lowers his spear points to the palinode's heart. "Withdraw," he says, as if saying it for their benefit more than its. "This road is lit by a light older than your appetite." The palinode leans as if to peer around the spear. That light is tired, it whispers. You can nap under it together. You are allowed. The ship's choir shivers. Boys who are lungs and nothing else look up in cages and murmur lyrics they do not know. A filigree of gold unrolls across the warp like a ruler in a school, where rulers are instruments and instruments are saints. The Astronomicon clears its throat. The hallway blooms white, not blinding, defining. The beak in bone shows its tell, a hairline crack at the left corner, as if laughter lives there too soon. The crack splits a millimeter. The palinode looks up, as if recognized by an uncle it didn't plan to meet. Reach the throne, the custodian intones, as if translating. This is not your corridor. The palinode sighs like a disappointed dinner guest. It places one gloved finger on the doctor's mask beak, a gentle touch. A hairline fracture kisses leather where bone had kissed wood. You will be hungry, it promises. I will lay a table. Noted, the doctor says, and the visitor withdraws between pages. The sister's silence holds for one count longer than is humane, and then releases. Men breathe. The filigree slows. The frame hums a sulk that will need supervision later. Codex note. Entities like the palinode offer conceptual optimization, redefining the cure into telos nullity without overt toxin. Custodian-lit Astronomicon pressure vectors force such demons to respect the corridor's jurisdiction, while pariah fields deny sympathetic resonance. They burn down the last measurement of black between judgment and pageantry. The fortress planet meets them with the cruelty of beauty. It is stone made into law. It is light made into reprimand. Gold and granite, banners and blood. They pass under architraves engraved with history's small print. Custodes form a corridor without needing to. Sisters become the shape of instruction. On a tier above, robed adepts from the administratum, the schola, the officio medicae, the ordo sepulturum, and Mechanicus stand like a witness index. No cheering, no hatred. Appetite tempered into audit. Varro feels the weight of the hall and lets it press her straight. She is not humbled. She is contextualized. The doctor's beak reflects 1,000 candles that would rather be stars. He tastes surgical steel, sanctified. He sees men carved into laws and laws carved into walls, and he understands this place heals by abducting the will to disobey and naming it loyalty. The inner doors part like a wound stapled and then reopened carefully to check. Beyond the threshold, the air tastes of burnt incense and old electricity. He feels it in the place behind the eyes where compulsion sits. It feels like having your name pronounced correctly. They enter the audience. There is no dais. There is a presence that will not be hinted at. The golden light here is not a color, but a pressure differential. It leans upon sin and makes it leak. It leans upon virtue and makes it honest. The throne is not shown. Its work is. The custodian kneels and is not ashamed. The sisters bow their heads because they do not need to see to serve. Varro stands with her chin up because even here she refuses to lie about what she is. Severin feels his absence become a mirror. The light looks at him and finds the shape it casts useful. The doctor does not kneel. He does not insult. He stands the way a surgeon stands in a ward with 4 beds and a dead man and 3 men he intends to save, which is to say, present. The exchange is not words. It is images pressed into the honest parts of minds that haven't been used lately because opinions were in the way. He sees a river mapped across a skull. He sees a plague house in Carrion City, where a woman writes her own name in chalk and dies under it on purpose, so the story finishes properly. He sees a child's quiet brought early because a song talked its father into consenting. He sees the garden in the warp, green like rot and beautiful like surrender. He sees a hand, a human one, lifting a dying man's head in the 31st millennium and promising him that his breath will matter. He sees that hand become a glove that points at a star and asks it to continue shining because people are still writing. The presence presses one phrase into him in a way that cannot be miscopied. Do not still the will. He shows it his ledger, not in words. He thinks of each incision as a careful no, of each hush as a chance for breath to come back later, of each death as the removal of ferment. It weighs these and lets him feel the scale's arm like a bone he cannot fix. It pushes the image of the cured into his mind. He sees them sitting. He sees their hands folded. He sees a boy's head turned toward a voice, and he sees the path by which that head could turn further. The presence sets down a rule like a blade on a table between men who love knives. Your quiet is triage, not liturgy. Varro feels the judgment land in her too. It touches her like a whetstone. She sees the line she will be allowed to defend. She sees where she will have to shoot first to keep a good man from doing a holy wrong. The custodian hears no permission for frenzy, only for fence building. The sisters hear no praise for silence, only a use. Severin feels for the first time since his mother's hands left him for the cloister that his emptiness is not only lack but design. The presence turns to the frame. It is an unsanctioned denial, a stolen Scranton spine, a chant box tuned to cage meanings. It hums in a key sparrows would not trust. It sits in the doctor's hand like a pet that barely refrains from biting. The light touches it. It does not melt. It behaves. It glows shamefully, like a tool that knows it was taken from a better house and used outside. The presence assigns a sign to stop it. 2 fingers, Varro's fingers. It binds that sign to the doctor's blood so that when she raises it, his hand will forget to close. The presence assigns a servant to hold the leash. Varro receives it without joy and without refusal. The presence assigns a clause for its own house. No hush near the choir. No hush within sight of thrones. No hush within earshot of men who write maps of the warp for living. The presence sets the conditions under which this man, this hole, this beak, can be used at all. Power scaling. Interlude, the 2. Under sanction, the doctor's anchor may operate only within a 20-cubit radius, no more than 3 pulses per engagement. Each pulse requires a null field within 6 paces to prevent rebound semantics. The hush cannot be directed at Astra Telepathica nodes, sacred reliquaries, or living command shrines. Doing so triggers automatic custodian interdiction. The cure must preserve agency. No conversion to obedience is permitted. Any patient reduced to quiescence must be reversible or granted euthanasia by inquisitorial right. Overdraw will be audited. 4 overdraws in a day require cessation until a sister's sign releases him. He will answer to the raised fingers and the rosette. He will not speak certain names. The hall breathes. It is not mercy. It is oxygen. The presence leaves one last image. 3 doors, faint as chalk on a dark board. The chalk dust tastes like iron and old paper. The doors are not opened. He's shown where to stand when asked. The doctor bows his head without lowering it. It is a paradox that does not offend the room. The custodian steps back exactly 1 pace. It is the only retreat these men admit. He is permitted, he says, and realizes permitted is the wrong word for what just happened. He says no other. Varro meets the gold gaze and receives the smallest allowance to remain as she is. It feels worse than praise and better than absolution. She will sleep better for it later and hate herself for it properly. Severin turns. The sisters look at him and see a brother in a house that doesn't write the word. He inclines his head and lets the absence around him smile. On the way out, they are armed without anyone handing them weapons. The doctor's mask is repaired by hands that have learned to not leave fingerprints. An auramite cuff is fitted over his bandage, engraved with the twin gesture. When 2 fingers rise before him, the cuff tightens and his fist remembers to be empty. A small slate is pressed into Varro's palm. It writes itself with whatever she cannot afford to forget. Outside the hall, in a chamber decorated with restraint, an officio medicae legate clears his throat to have a conversation with the doctor about exhaustion and care protocols. Varro intercepts his neat ideas with a blade of tone. "He is a knife," she says. "He will not be stored on a velvet cushion." The legate nods, memorizes a new word for later use, and steps aside. The custodian stops them at the last arch and says a thing that might be kindness if these people believed in such. "The enemy heard you be noticed," he says. "It will offer you a truer version of yourself. It will say it is closer to your dream than we are. It will be right in tone and wrong in telos." "I know," the doctor says. "You will forget," the custodian warns. "That is why we wrote rules." Varro listens. She listens better than most at the moment just before a fight. She stores the phrasing in the part of her that acts when she trusts words least. They reboard the black ship with a parade none of them wanted. Sisters align like a word spelled correctly. The custodian does not come. His work is to stand between doors, not to go through them. As clamps unfasten, a servo-monk presents Varro with a lacquered case. Inside, a signet of the Ordo with a new inlay, small and blasphemously useful. A sliver of auramite that is more contract than metal. It will make a line when held over a map of a city. The line will refuse certain streets. Back in the Medici Bay, Sister Varenne's ink lines are checked by a quiet null. The filigree has not advanced. The cuff sits cruel and lovely round the doctor's wrist. When he flexes, it whispers apology and tightens just enough to remind him that free hands are for men who can be trusted forever. They burn for home. On the planet below their destination, Halcyon makes do without grand halls. Holt writes a new hour with bricks. Ryan teaches boredom to boys who thought war was a story, with faster scenes. Tertius coaxes ducks by calling them by their old names. Priests tell people to sit up and count fours. The cured haul without making themselves nuisances. The palanquin is dead for good. But Virilok makes a new theatre out of alleys and laughs in a lower register. Above, the black ship makes white noise. The warp takes the puckered shape of a map folded wrong and then smoothed right by patient palms. The sisters ripple their silence like veils hung out to dry and brought in before evening. The palinode trails at the edge of the corridor like a shadow shaped by grammar. It does not press. It suggests. Varro sees it without seeing and places 2 fingers before the doctor's eyes 3 times on the voyage. The cuff tightens the way a lover who will not be one puts a hand on a wrist during a party to say we should go soon. He breathes. 4. 4. He dreams once, sits up, and does not tell anyone what the dream was. In the morning, he names the tools in his satchel like a rosary. They fall toward the besieged world with the ugly grace of returning workmen. The Vox carves a path in bad weather. Holt's voice comes up and makes the ship a room in his house. "They learned," he says. "They learned you would come back. They prepared a lecture." "We brought our own," Varro says. "Prepare the desk." Severin stands, and his absence makes room for a fight without spectacle. The doctor flexes his hand once and feels the cuff remember him. He lifts the frame. It purrs, chastened, ready to sing within the rule. He will still pay. He has learned the price will be audited. On the tarmac, Virilok waits with a small bow because he is a gentleman by his own law. Behind him, a shape in white bone waits too, hands folded, so polite, so ready to offer completion. Both stand at the mouth of the hour that will follow. The black ship opens its mouth like a confession and lets them out into appetite and math. The custodian's last sentence follows them like a benediction and a threat. Reach the throne again only if commanded. They do not look back at gold. They look at smoke. They walk into it not as saints, not as doctors, not as law, but as tools that can cut and, if used correctly, not sever the thing they meant to save. The wind over the tarmac tastes of steel that remembered blood. The black ship's throat closes behind them. The city scopes to the horizon like a patient waiting to be told if the knife is necessary. Recap. They return with sanction. The cuff at his wrist is law. The nulls are his corridor. The hour is a cut fast approaching. Verilok stands at parade rest, scythe low, bells quiet like hands folded at a funeral. Beside him waits the polite thing in bone, fingers laced, voice a promise it hasn't had to break yet. Around them, banners rustle with illnesses taught to rhyme. Chirurgeon, Verilok purrs, visor grin fixed. A new wristband, how devout. The palinode inclines its head, as if the ship delivered needles on schedule. We brought linens, it says. You may fold them over the city when you are tired. Varro raises 2 fingers. The cuff tightens just enough to make his glove remember humility. He doesn't resent it. He likes breaks in rooms filled with falling. Boundaries, she says, not to him alone. Within 20 cubits, 3 pulses, null within 6. No choir, no shrines, no command thrones. Preserve will. Any stillness we make must be reversible or relieved by right. Overdraw to 4, and I stop your hand. The palinode enjoys the list like a dessert menu. It lets you pretend your mercy has teeth, it murmurs. It does, Holt says, stepping into earshot with men behind him whose boots decided to be steady. It has rules. Rules make roads. Ryan looks down the road Verilok guards. They hold the weak flank with ceremony. We cut it with work. Choir's breath impulses Margos. Give me boring wind. Tertius mutters to Iron. The vents oblige with exhalations that smell like laundry that refuse to be baptized. Recite it, Varro warns softly. The doctor names himself without names. Work. Refuse infection. Method. Hush the wrong definitions, not men. Mercy. 4 in, 4 out. Law. 2 fingers. He turns his beak towards Severin. Walk at 2 paces. Always, Severin says. A stone where water once tried to argue. Verilok sweeps the scythe in a polite half bow that chops a ribbon of air and lets nothing fall out. Shall we rehearse? His bells tinkle as if asking leave to be wicked. The palinode unfolds its hands. Or skip to the end, it says gently. You can announce what you are becoming. He steps forward into sanction. The first push is small by habit. Poxwalkers like smudged punctuation. A pair of plague marines peeling. A blight drone looking for applause. Guardsmen meet them at elbow height, with rifles that act like grammar, stopping clauses from running on. Sisters pick the commas that slide. Rhine sappers couch traps that make every overstep a lesson. The palinode watches the city behind them the way a good clerk watches a clock. They are so ready to be done, it murmurs, not pushing, only proving. Verilok searches the doctor's posture for the weakness he installed. He sees the black filigree under the cuff and smiles as if at a scar on a friend. He swings. The scythe learns from the last duel and sings a higher note, slipping past null and law toward the easiest noun in the room. He meets 2 fingers raised. Varro's hand snaps up without grandeur. The cuff tightens to a kind of kindness that makes fists into advice. The doctor pivots without touching the frame and steps through the blade's wake with a surgeon's disrespect for spectacle. The wound in his arm hums, but does not choose the choir. He refuses the new dictionary without speech. He hums the sanctioned tone. The hush runs out to the limit, like tide disciplined by peers. Idols at the road's mouth falter and forget their words. The drone wobbles and lands as if embarrassed to have been noticed singing. Pulse 1, Varro notes, voice low, count on her slate. The palinode uses courtesy like a knife. Think of the ward, it whispers, stepping into ear's reach with no sound at all. After this hour, they will ask you not to stop. With me, you never have to hear them cry again. Isn't that the oath? Do not make a ward weep. I can file the edges of their requests until nothing cuts. Your archive will suffocate, he answers, not moving his head, just letting breath carry judgment. You confuse kindness with absence. It tilts its mask. The crack by the corner deepens a hair. Absence is the kindest thing, it says. No more want. Want keeps breath stubborn, he says. Virilok tires of debate. He is not winning. He knocks into the world with the scythe like a neighbor banging the wall. Bells under the banners answer. A line of fog slips under men's coats with small hands. Holt's code lands through the bead like a sandbag thrown into the correct place. Shift left, cover right, hold breath fours. The line obeys because they learned boredom until it became freedom. Sister Verene moves the cured like furniture that knows its room. They haul, they brace. They hold ropes without heroic thinking. The doctor steps within the law. He clicks the frame, tone low, controlled, cost mapped. The hush peels the fog apart without making a hole big enough to lose a man in. Poxwalkers stop, stare at their hands as if surprised that they have the wrong number of fingers, and then lie down because boredom is powerful, if not poetic. Pulse 2, Varro counts. The cuff warms against his skin, like a friend reminding him they agreed not to drink before noon. Virilok comes on with ropes of definition webbing out from his greaves to snag ankles and intentions. Severin steps into each with all the glamour of drying paint. He makes the web unbeautiful. Virilok snarls for the first time. It is a small human sound, and Varro files it under things to love killing later. The palinode waits for the moment doctrine arrives. It can smell it, the corner where inevitability meets budget. It leans into the doctor's sightline and shows him the 3 doors. They stand in the air like chalk on slate. He doesn't look away, because the throne taught him not to blink at tests. Return. Walk back through the hole you made. Take your frame, take your ledger. Leave these cities to their own diseases. Watch memory fade like ink in a window. Wake in a place that smells like your old winter and wonder if Halcyon ever existed. You will sleep. You will stop paying. You will start humming again to yourself when you mix tinctures and never know why your hands ache. It is a soft ending. It is abandonment with an elegant name. Free agent. Cut without leash. Hush until it steadies. Save 10 cities and teach 20 to worship quiet. Make a schism without meaning to. Wear gratitude like a plague. Collect zealots like flies. Fight inquisitors with men who want to kiss your gloves. Burn, save, burn. You die interesting and ruin 2 worlds with good intentions. Sanction servant. Become law you did not write. Wear a cuff. Count pulses. Submit to fingers. Cut less than you could. Save more than you like. Last longer than your taste for gratitude. Die at a time chosen by paperwork and love the fact that you did not choose wrong. Maximal impact. Maximal irritation. Minimal poetry. Varro does not speak. Holt does not know how to speak on that subject, even if asked. Severin is present the way a door frame is present, when you lean your forehead against it and decide not to leave the house after all. The palinode makes the doors smell like fresh bread. He thinks of the girl by the ration crates who learned not to cough when he looked at her. He thinks of the woman with the knife who wanted her husband back and got a job instead. He thinks of Sister Verraine counting fours with a hand that hurts. He thinks of Holt's ugly truth and Ryan's beautiful boredom and Varro's hand raised because it had to be. He chooses. He does not say it. He sets the choice in the way he moves. He lifts the frame and holds it so the cuff's sigil and his beak's shadow make a single icon on the stones. A short beak under 2 fingers, held for stop. The auramite bites light. The world accepts a new logo without being asked if it wants one. He steps forward on the sanctioned circle. The palinode makes a please sound like a clerk getting someone to sign where they were supposed to. Oh, it breathes. Obedience. How lovely to see it in someone clever. He gives it his eyes. I obey the rule that keeps your gentleness from colonializing my ward. It bows, hands together. Permit me a last offering then, it whispers, suddenly earnest. A purer cure. Take the quiescence under the cuff. Rename it agency. No one will know. I will sign nothing. Only you and I will. He wants it. He can imagine never hearing a man cry out as a blade goes in. He can imagine his hand never shaking as the whole drinks. He lets the wanting pass him like a nurse with a meal tray he is not supposed to have yet. No, he says, not loud. I keep the tremor. Verilog charges. Debate is over. Revisions are due. The scythe comes low and up, the arc that takes titles and heads. Varro meets it at half angle and holds, then twists. Ryan's men puncture the rhythm with honest rounds. Severin steps into the crash of metaphors and makes them resentful. The doctor looks at the city instead of the scythe. He sees the throb behind Verilog, the next organ, the push line that will consecrate a manufactorum into a confessional. He sees its theme, a conduit half sunk in brick that hums a note cheap and effective as bad wine. He runs out of the duel with the impudence of a man who refused the coronation. Cover, he says, and finds cover because men like Holt take orders from reality. He reaches the seam at 20 cubits. The cuff nudges. He stops. Severin is a counted pace behind. Varro's fingers lift in his periphery, and his body loves the shape even while his mind complains. He kneels. He sets the frame. He does not overdraw. The hum bites. The hush blooms within rule. The conduit sobs and forgets to load the practicum. The organ upbranch stumbles and fumes like a drunk, forgets his seat. Verilog feels it and roars as if embarrassed by being edited. He abandons art and tries for slaughter. Varro's sword slides, parries, reintroduces etiquette. Ryan's line eats a charge and gives it back in pieces. The palinode steps to the scene with him, an attending physician who remembers the right word for that instrument and wants you to use it. Let me tune it, it says, and touches the frame. The hum turns sweet. The hush aims to be blanket. The cuff tightens until his hand cramps and his teeth hurt for a heartbeat from clenching. 2, Varro warns, both fingers up, both law and kin. He breathes fours. He remembers the presence phrase like a rule in bones. Do not still the will. He retunes. The hush becomes a scalpel again. It refuses air that teaches surrender and leaves the air that makes lungs work. The conduit dies without sermon. Pulse 3, Varro notes. Her voice is small and correct. Verilog realizes the performance is no longer his. He drops his blade for a step, cuts to the side, and swings for Sister Verraine carrying a child. The scythe wants to hum litanies through her chest. Holt is too far. Ryan is facing the other way. The world offers a bad ending greedily. Severin breaks the timing. He walks into the swing, and the scythe meets a hole. It screams and tries to drag the hole out of the man, and the hole refuses, because it has a body to live in today. The edge spits sparks that sound like blasphemies whispered into a coat closet. Severin's skull rings. He does not fall. He makes a face that might be pain and might be victory. Varro steps across the line and makes a cut she has been practicing in her mind for days. The scythe's haft splits. Verilog grabs the blade with gauntleted hand and pulls, and it comes like a tooth, spraying a laugh he did not intend to lose. She leaves him the joke and takes the leverage. Verilog stares at his empty hand, then at her. He has never loved anyone. He might love her for this second because she did not steal his dignity. She corrected his instrument. "Leave," she advises, sword low, "or I will teach you humility where you keep your God." He considers. He hears the organ die under the hush and the palinode's breath on the chirurgeon's ear. He hears bells choke at the avenue's throat. He makes a decision that feels like bending a knee inside his armor. He retreats, not into a fold, not magic. He turns and leaves, walking, bells quiet, men rallying around him like a grammar they forgot when they got excited. The palinode stays. Its work is not to leave. It is to remain wherever compliance looks like love. "Your hour ends," it tells the doctor gently. "You will pay." "I will pay," he agrees. He thinks of the ledger on Varro's slate, the one that writes itself with rules. "You will not be cashier." The palinode tips its head as if proud of him. "Keep the tremor," it says, and withdraws not like a ghost, but like a suggestion denied hosting. Silence doesn't fall. Boredom does. Men breathe. Sister Vereen sets the child down and counts 4 so he knows how to win. Holt calls lines like liturgy, and they hold because now they know how to worship without lying. Ryan swears with affection at men who got through without trying to be heroes. The doctor sits on a broken curb and watches his hand shake. The cuff lets him. Severin leans elbow to knee beside him and lets absence do its good work. Make quiet into space, not fate. Varro stands over both like law and like roof. She raises 2 fingers. He nods and unmakes extra noise inside his skull. He looks at her hand and sees the 3 paths still floating behind it, in a light only he can taste. He picks the one he already chose and speaks for the room that needs to hear it. "I am under sanction," he says, simple as a diagnosis. "I am inquisitorial instrument, limited and counted. My work preserves will. My hush is surgical. Mercy is in rites we do in daylight. Say the clause," she insists, "because language makes habits. I will not hush near choir, reliquary, or throne," he says. "I will not overdraw beyond 4 without stop. I will accept euthanasia by your right. For any quiet I cannot unwind. I will stop at your sign." "I accept," she replies. "I will stop you when you forget to love the tremor. I will shoot anyone who asks you to love silence more than them." Holt nods, as if a wall was just built straight the first time. "I add 1, he says, audacity domesticated. "Every patient returns a name. If they cannot, we give them one and say it until they steal it back. No quiet without names." "Written," Varro agrees, tapping the slate with the slim blade of one nail. Law hums. The city hears none of that and all of it. Banners are cut down and boiled for rags. The bell ropes are severed and tied into child lines. The cured haul and are paired with living men who say their names every 10 steps. The manufactoria exhale honest work without whispering scripture. In alleys where whisperers try to plant, ministers of the mundane recite the breath. Name, work, whom you carry, 4 in, 4 out. It is the most boring revolution the hive has ever seen. By sunset, which is a lie here, because smog decides when it is time to be orange. Death Guard push once more out of revenge, not plan. It fails. They retreat through the same lanes they anointed, grieved by their own theology. Virolog looks back only once, right where the palanquin cracked, and inclines his head as a craftsman to a rival who will ruin him later if given time. They won. They will have to win again tomorrow, but that is the victory they wanted. In the cathedral side chapel, before exhaustion decides whether to be sleep or coughing, Sister Varan unwinds the bandage at the doctor's wrist. The filigree has subsided 1 knuckle's worth. The cuff gleams like obedience that liked its day. Price? Varro asks quietly. Less than I feared, he answers. More than I like. He watches a cured man sit straighter when a name is said into his ear. He marks the moment his eyes show irritation at a small stone in his shoe. The doctor lets out a breath like a tired nurse kissed by a husband in a corridor not designed for kissing. The girl from the ration crates appears at the door with contraband. 2 mugs of something that pretends to be tea and fails nobly. She sets one near him, one near Sister Varen, and doesn't cough. You didn't die, she says, approving. Good. Not yet, he replies. My enemies will be disappointed later. Your friends will be annoyed, she counter-offers, and make you keep working. He inclines his head. I prefer annoyed to grateful. Me too, she says, and goes to carry linen for the hospitaller because she has learned the dignity of unfancy jobs. Varro and Holt stand by the chapter house door, watching the city settle around the strain. You know what this becomes, Holt says. He sounds tired in a way that feels like work was worth doing. A mandate and a fight, Varro says. He will be borrowed by governors more afraid of boredom than death. He will be hated by priests who can smell a useful heresy. He will be loved wrong. He will be asked to write a catechism. He will refuse, and they will write one for him. Will you shoot them? When necessary, she says. When not, I will lift 2 fingers and make a surgeon swear. Fair, Holt says. He returns to the map because maps accepted him when people were complicated. Her bead clicks with a tone that smells like victory being audited. The custodian's voice steps across the ocean of static with all the drama of a receipt. Sanctioned servant, he says, which is as good as a benediction from that house gets. Continue until countermanded. Reach the throne only when called. Keep the tremor. Understood, Varro answers. She doesn't say thank you because he would not enjoy being thanked. Tell him, the custodian adds, a soft cruelty. There is a room in gold where his ledger will be kept when he's done. We will put it on a shelf near a book that smells like incense and burnt bread. He doesn't get to read until later. I will not tell him that, she says. It sounds like motivation. He must not be motivated by your trophies. Correct, the custodian says, almost amused, and is gone. The palinode stands once at the edge of the cathedral square, in a polite dusk no one admits seeing. It watches a child say his name. It watches a man set down a quiet wife's basket and ask her to choose which end of the rope she will carry. It looks at the twin-finger sigil painted in chalk over a door next to a beak drawn by a child with too much ash on his hands. Beloved, it whispers toward the doctor, and the word dies in Severin's absence before it crosses the space. It retreats into grammar. It will be back where boredom falters. Virolog writes a letter in the old way, with a nail on a plate. He writes to a reaper heavier than him and asks for a better scythe. He signs it with a bell he breaks himself. On ships that smell like prayer that bit its own lip and bled. Some men take notice. Ordo Sepulturum sends observers with quill knives. The Officio Medicae convenes a colloquium to discuss whether Hush can be sterilized. 3 Magi debate whether the cuff violated a patent, then are interrupted by a fire that needs tending. In the Schola, a lecture is quietly updated on the use of boredom as countercreed. One sentence mentions a doctor without a name. Sister Varen writes a new litany on a board where children learn letters. Name, work, whom you carry. She places a bracket by quiet and writes, in a hand that doesn't shake as much now, only until. Holt posts an order signed with his ugly signature. Fixed ratio of grief to bread. The ration lines groan and then organize. It isn't fair. It is survivable. Ryan teaches boys who wanted to brag the pleasure of being unnoticed. He tells them a story about a choir that didn't break because no one tried to sing the loudest. They groan and grin. They live. Varro keeps law like a blade and obscenity at the same time. She raises 2 fingers often, not to him, but to herself in the glass, to remind the woman there what kept her world from loving its own sleep too much. He works. When disease breaks like weather on iron coasts, he stands at the correct distance. He hushes the part that preaches. He leaves enough wrongness that men remember to be angry and therefore to get up tomorrow. He refuses 3 requests a day to make everything quiet forever. He accepts a bullet intended for him when a father blames the beak for a son who stayed too calm. He treats the father's hand after. He doesn't learn the boy's name because it would break a useful binder inside him. On a day that pretends to be holy because enough people survive to call it that, the girl from the ration crates takes chalk and draws the twin finger sign over the door of a soup hall. She adds a small beak under it because art demands clarity. Everyone understands the terms. Stop, breathe, cut what lies, leave the will. In a tiny room under the cathedral stairs, Sister Varen keeps a ledger with a scrap of auramite nailed to the cover. It doesn't glow. It ticks when rain hits certain ducks. It holds the names of the quiet who became people again and the names of those she released with right. She doesn't let anyone read it, not even him. She knows he would turn numbers into debt and she needs him to work, not count. He sits sometimes on the curb where the palanquin cracked and lets his calf cool against the evening. Severin sits 2 paces away. Neither speaks. Both exist in a way that keeps the stones honest. Once, very late, after a day that ate men without being punished for it, he dreams again. There are 3 doors. Behind the first is a small clinic where winter is the only disease that looks like a gift. Behind the second is a procession of cities carrying him on a palanquin made of good intentions. Behind the third is a gate with 2 fingers painted on it. It opens only when a woman with ink-stained hands raises her hand and says, "Enough." He wakes into a room where law smells like fatigue. He chooses again without thinking about it. Third door. The hour after dawn, Varro stands before a knot of priests and tells them the boring miracle they will help perform today. They fidget because boring miracles don't look good in chronicles. She doesn't care. She has a paper that says mandate and a blade that says the same. He crosses the square. A boy runs at him with a lower lip bitten and an arm held wrong. He kneels and sets the fracture. He does not hush anything but pain. The boy yowls in relief because relief has a sound. The city listens. It enjoys that sound more than the palinode would allow. "Eat," Sister Vereen says, thrusting a piece of bread the color of dust into his hand. He looks at it and laughs once. "What?" she asks. Suspicious of laughter, friendly toward it when she isn't. "No raisins," he says. "Good." She rolls her eyes and waves him back to the ward. At the eastern gate, a small brass plate goes up. It shows a beak under a pair of raised fingers. Below, someone has stamped a line that reads like catechism, written by men who hate catechisms. Quiet is a tool, not a home. Beyond, stars do their cold work. On far decks, custodies stand where doors wait to be used. In offices that never empty, adepts build new forms that will make this harder and also safer. In a garden that is not a place, A thing in bone puts on gloves and rehearses both gentle and monstrous ways to offer a gift. It will come when invited by exhaustion and law, accidentally dozing. It will be refused with kinship and disgust. He keeps the tremor. He pays and he works and he teaches boredom to men who thought faith was louder than breath. He learns he can love a city by refusing to allow it to enjoy its death. On a night thick with the smoke that smells like dinners that weren't burned on purpose, he walks to a rail above the manufactoria and looks at the belt of lights around the hive. They flicker in errors that mean life. He raises 2 fingers to himself like a benediction reserved for stubborn sinners. He lowers them and goes back to the cut. A siren begins. He listens. He smiles into the mask without sentiment. Again, he tells the night. Halcyon answers with the small drum line of men putting on boots in rooms that haven't gotten cleaner, only safer. The city lifts its chin. It breathes 4. It picks up the rope. Somewhere in gold, a book is left open on a lectern in a room that no one ever dusts, because dust is the law of places. On its spine, someone has written the title with a needle. Ledger of Hush, performed under rule. It waits because the man it belongs to is not done.